Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody, and let me go ahead and just call this meeting to order of the Santa Ana City Council special meeting tonight, where we have one item on the agenda. We will be talking about the housing opportunity ordinance, and we'll be discussing the work study in a work study session format. So welcome. I hope everybody is doing well. I was reminded from a couple of my colleagues that to the extent those of you who have not been vaccinated, we recommend highly that you wear your masks indoors. We are inside. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with this variant. So I would recommend for your safety and those people that you care about, please make sure that you keep that mask on. And we will, we're far enough away. We've got plexiglass between us, but we want to make sure that you all are healthy and safe, as well as members of your family when you go back home. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to the clerk. Actually, before I turn it over to the clerk for roll call, let me take care of just a quick housekeeping announcement. So this meeting is taking place by in-person attendance and via teleconference by Zoom. The public may access the meeting via the Santa Ana YouTube channel or the city's website. And as usual, please bear with us as we may have some technical difficulties. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask the clerk to please conduct roll call.
Councilmember Becerra.
Here.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Lopez.
Present.
Councilmember Mendoza. Councilmember Mendoza, I see that you have virtually joined us. If you would please select the microphone icon on your device. Councilmember Mendoza, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device to unmute your call. Councilmember Fan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Peñalosa.
Here.
Mayor Sarmiento.
Here. And if you'll all please rise and face the flag and place your right hand over your heart, paying special attention to the last verse of the Pledge of Allegiance. Please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. So tonight's single item on the business calendar will be to discuss in a works study session format the Housing Opportunity Ordinance. I want to thank staff for preparing the information that we're going to be receiving tonight. But really, I want to thank my colleagues who wanted to make themselves available to receive more information. There's been an ad hoc committee that was convened to take a deep dive into some of the technical aspects of the Housing Opportunity Ordinance, but for the benefit of the public and for the benefit of those that are eagerly anticipating and interested in seeing what the discussion will follow and decisions made on the WHO, as it's known as an acronym. We are entertaining this, and we've done this for other matters as well. We've had study sessions on the waste hauling contract as well. So I want to thank staff's indulgence in making sure they make these processes as transparent and open as possible, and thank my colleagues for lending of their time to make sure that the public and everybody is aware of decisions that are being made at the City Council meeting as they should be. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our staff to get us kicked off.
Thank you, Mayor. Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members, as mentioned, it's a special work study session with only one item on the agenda, which I'm kind of excited about. So what we do have planned for you is staff is going to give a brief presentation on the item, and then you will have the opportunity to hear from the invited stakeholders along with the members of the public that want to give you their opinions on this very important topic. With that, I'm going to introduce Executive Director Min Tai, who will provide the presentation.
Thank you, City Manager Ridge. Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem City Council. Daniel, if you can help me start the presentation. Thank you, Daniel. I'll start with a quick recap of the events. Tonight, we are reviewing the recommendation of the ad hoc committee, and this is a continuance from your July 6th meeting. The council did provide direction also for staff to reach out to stakeholders in our community in preparation for this work study session. The City Council identified over 100 stakeholders from the communities that included neighborhood leaders, included housing organizations and advocates, business associations, as well as housing developer, both market rate and affordable housing. For the next few slides, I'll be going over the recommendation of the committee as it relates to some of their key recommendations. What I'll do is I'll quickly go over the current ordinance as applicable, and then the changes the ad hoc committee is going to recommend. The first item is the applicability and the trigger. Currently, the Housing Opportunity Ordinance applies to projects with 20 or more units. The ad hoc committee recommendation is to adjust that threshold from 20 units to 5 units, and then combining it with a sliding scale for payment of the in lieu fee in terms of that option, and I'll go over that in the next couple slides. Currently, it only applies to projects where there's increase in residential density above the prescribed general plan, and also apply to only incremental units above what is currently allowable. The proposal, the recommendation of the ad hoc committee is to include those triggers, but also to have additional triggers that essentially reverts back to the prior WHO that was in place before the WHO was changed in September of 2020. And this includes increase in residential density permitted zoning, and as well as any city-initiated general plan amendment and zone changes after November 28th of 2011. In terms of rental set-aside units, this current set-aside is 15% and 10%, and that's for low and very low income respectively. The committee is including that, but also is recommending the addition of 5%, which represent extremely low income, which represent 0 to 30% of AMI. In terms of the options to satisfy the inclusion requirement, this is when a developer look at options of not having to build on site, but the potential for payment of an in lieu option. Currently, the ordinance is set at $5 across the board for any project that is over 20 units. The ad hoc is recommending that the in lieu fee be readjusted to $15 per square foot for projects with 20 more units, and then applying a sliding scale as you see below. And as you can see, it starts out at 5 units and ranges all the way up to 20 units, and range between $6 per square foot all the way up to $15 per square foot. In terms of the payment of the in lieu fee, currently the ordinance is requiring that any project that opt to pay for the in lieu fee to pay prior to building permit. The ad hoc committee is recommending that this payment be allowed to be stretched to the prior issuance of the first occupancy permit. The rationale for this is that by extending the payment period, it will potentially save carrying costs on the fee amount that would have been paid at the beginning of the project. In addition, the City Council on July 6th discussed skilled labor and trained workforce. The Council requested that the current language, which encourages project opting for the in lieu fee payment or receiving inclusion housing fund to provide enforceable commitment to use skilled and trained labor. The City Council asked that this language be changed to making this a mandatory requirement for the purpose of your discussion tonight. Other enhancements include affordability periods. The affordability period currently is 55 years. The proposed change by the committee is to make that in perpetuity. In addition, the ad hoc committee also recommended that the priority use of the fund to also include priority for new affordable housing opportunity for large families currently living in the city, and includes program addressing housing security, eviction prevention, housing legal assistance for city residents. That, in summary, is some of the key provisions that the ad hoc committee recommended for the city council to consider. And for your discussion tonight, the agenda includes staff's presentation. There's also key stakeholder comments. We invited, as I mentioned, over 100 key stakeholders who are here tonight, as well as residents and community leaders. And then public comments. And the goal is for the council to discuss the items and provide direction for staff as to the next steps.
Great, thank you, Director Tai, and I know that there's certainly a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of people who are interested, so I think you did a robust effort to try to advise everybody and provide notice to members of the public as well. So we will handle this as we normally do our public comment section of a regularly agendized meeting. Everybody will be given an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. And we will begin with those that are in person first, and we have several people that are waiting to speak online as well. We wanted to make sure we have that option available to folks that can't make it here in person and still want to address the council. So I thank staff and the clerk's office for making that, that adjunct ability to have people comment. I think Madam Clerk, do we now cut off the line for those that want to comment? I think some people have had an opportunity to go ahead and log in earlier. So let me go ahead and begin with a list of cards that I have here. And I'll call you in order, so if you guys can get in the queue really quickly, I'll make sure that we all go through this as painlessly as possible. So let me start with somebody who's I know is going to be very painless: Ernesto Medrano, Andrew Gonzalez, and Doug Mangione.
My name is Ernesto Medrano. I represent 140,000 hardworking men and women in the construction industry, the Los Angeles and Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council. Also representing 26 apprenticeship training centers in our jurisdiction that provides about, right now, 21,000 apprentices through the pipeline. And I'm here to urge the City Council to improve the labor standards in the ordinance. The skilled and trained workforce in its entirety should be required, just as it was unanimously proposed by the Planning Commission last year. But I think you should also include some sort of a method for a good faith effort to have local and veteran hire. Just like the community workforce agreement we have with the city, we think that that's been a good thing. A little bit of background: I think it's important to note that when it comes to construction, there's really two industries or two sectors that bifurcated. You either have your commercial, which is by and large unionized, and your residential. And let's face it, it's not a pretty picture in the residential sector for the workers. 48% of the industry of construction worker families are dependent upon a safety net in the state of California, which comes up to $3 billion a year for us. In other words, we taxpayers are helping to subsidize all of that. I do want to commend the City Council for its leadership last year for incentivizing the development of construction, of housing. I think that if there's any one thing everybody in this room agrees is we do need more housing. Of course, it's how we get there is a conversation that we need to have collectively. But it's very clear that it's not a pretty picture. The district attorney in the County of Orange has a wage theft and insurance division, and a lot of the issues that go on with those contractors are in the residential sector. There is a history of exploitation. There is a history of wage theft. There is a history of misclassification. So it's not a pretty picture, and we think that this is an opportunity to have contractors and these developers to partake in the opportunity to create a skilled and trained workforce and to enhance apprenticeship opportunities to provide a pathway into the middle class. The word we always hear is, well, it won't pencil out. But you know what? And the criticism is that there's a skilled labor shortage, but the fact of the matter remains that there's an opportunity here for these folks to also be invested in this. We invest in the state of California. We have $200 million a year that provide for 68,000 apprentices. By the way, 20% of those come from justice-impacted communities. In here, in Santana, it is the only city that we have our apprenticeship readiness multi-craft core curriculum. At the Remington Center, at Santa Ana College, and we actually been placing graduates of those programs into our apprenticeship program. We also have it at the high school level, at Century High School. I'm very proud to say that we're doing very well there. So again, it's extremely important to note that I think there's an opportunity for us to do right by this ordinance, to make it a requirement. I noticed that the public contract code doesn't have 2603, I understand, but I think it's extremely important for us to not leave it aspirational. So again, I urge this council to make it a requirement to have the skilled and trained workforce requirement, to consider looking at the local hire opportunities. And as a last thing I would like to say is, some of you have not had an opportunity to train one of our apprenticeship training facilities. In Orange County, I think there's about 3 facilities. The electricians is here in Santana. In La Palma, you have the iron workers, and in Buena Park, you have the carpenters. So I'd like to invite each and every one of you, staff and council, to participate, give me a call, and we'd be more than glad to give you a tour of one of our training facilities so you know exactly what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Andrew Gonzalez, followed by Doug Mangione, followed by Ryan Ogolnik.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and of course staff. I want to thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to speak here tonight. It's a very important issue. The housing crisis in California is first and foremost a supply and demand problem. We simply don't have the supply to meet the demand. Over the past several decades, elected leaders of all stripes have done an excellent job of setting up barriers to the construction of housing in the name of gentrification, limiting density and congestion, or preserving community standards. Now we find ourselves in a housing crunch, and not unexpectedly, housing prices have surged as supply and demand takes effect. So what this means is that every unit of housing built, either market rate or affordable, will help to alleviate the housing crisis and drive costs down. The other half of the housing affordability crisis are jobs and wages. If residents have good jobs with living wages, they can just afford more housing. Currently, affordable residential construction wages ensure that those that are building the housing can't afford it. Affordable housing developers have gotten away with paying poverty wages with no medical benefits or retirement security. Affordable housing advocates have endorsed this arrangement so they can tell their constituents they've gotten more affordable housing built. Status quo puts an undue burden on local workers, family, and the government services that are needed to make up the difference. This is an unsustainable model that must be addressed. I support the city's plan to build more housing and more affordable housing. I support the city in their demand that if developers want to be exempt from affordable housing mandates, the city should get something for it. I would suggest that local living wage jobs would be an excellent solution to the in-lieu regulatory mix. Not only would developers be able to build housing that pencil out, but it helps drive down the cost of housing, but will also help the second half of the affordable housing issue. Furthermore, skilled local jobs have a substantial economic impact to the local businesses and communities. I urge you to consider a regulatory framework that allows for the construction and development of much-needed housing that also ensures local living wage jobs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Doug Mangione, followed by Ryan Ogolnik, followed by Sam Romero.
Mayor Sarmiento, City Council, it's good to see you all again. It's been a long time since we've been in chambers here, so I thank you and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Doug Mangione, and I'm speaking on behalf of the 2,500 skilled and trained electrical workers of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers here in Orange County. You have a lot of important things to discuss tonight, nothing more important than housing and affordability and how you get there, but I just want you to consider for us, the workers that are going to build these. IBW, we've been part of the city of Santa Ana since our founding in 1928, founded right here in the city of Santa Ana. Our apprenticeship is located in this city, and we are in the process of purchasing a new, bigger building to house our expanding apprenticeship school, and we chose to purchase that building and to stay and remain in the city of Santa Ana. So we will still be part of Santa Ana as we have been for almost 100 years. When we're finished, I hope we invite all of you and you can attend our grand opening. We can only offer opportunities for good careers in the electrical construction trades, which pay good wages with benefits, if you, as a council, agree that providing these careers to local residents and veterans are important and should not only be encouraged, but it should be required that development in our city be constructed with community benefits agreement, utilizing skilled and trained workers and local hire requirements. This is how you're going to give local men and women the skills to bring them into the middle class, skills that they will retain for a lifetime, giving them the ability to live here in our city, raise families in our city, purchase homes and goods in our cities. Whatever you decide to do tonight, please put in the framework and give these young men and women the opportunity that we can offer them and that the trades can offer them. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for your comments. Ryan Ogolnik, followed by Sam Romero, followed by Guadalupe Rico.
Good evening. Ryan Ogolnik, Vineyards Development. I've participated in affordable housing in Santa Ana for at least the last decade. Even prior to the first ordinance in 2011, we were paying affordable housing fees, typically $3,000 a unit or $4 a foot. Additional background regarding sort of my company and the affordable fee over the years. My company has paid more than 50% of the WHO fees since 2011, and we've paid more than all the other projects combined. And I'm here today to say at $17, $18 a foot, the fee is too high. The mayor will attest, because he's been here longer than me, but I've never once objected to the fee. In fact, I've always seen the fee as necessary in Santa Ana, but at $17, $18, it's getting to a point that we won't see any development in Santa Ana. For more background on this point, I've sat with Jamboree, I've sat with the Kennedy Commission over the last 7 years. We've brainstormed how do we make these dollars go far, how do we leverage these dollars, and whether or not on-site or off-site made more sense for Santa Ana. I've sat in countless work study sessions, met with staff, and again, I've never once thought the fee was not appropriate. I always thought we needed a fee. Of course, it comes down to what is that fee. Lastly, just by way of background, and I'll get to where I think this fee should go, even when the city had litigation issues, policing the homeless, had issues finding a property. I've donated a property what was to be 6 months. It turned out to be 3 years. I provided another building for the city for a permanent shelter and helped them, and currently helping them construct the shelter. The point is, I care about the disadvantaged and passionate about doing anything that can assist the homeless and providing affordable housing. We develop housing that makes sense, that developers assist affordable housing and homeless housing. We've developed shelters in Anaheim, Fullerton, and Los Angeles. I'm not coming here tonight solely self-serving. In fact, for the first time in a decade, we don't have anything in the pipeline. I come here to help you guys find a balance of what makes sense between development and not developing. When the fee was at $15 a foot, nobody paid the fee. We couldn't pay the fee. It just didn't make any sense. We did pay a fee of $9.35 for Parks and Paseo, but even at $9.35, we must have gone out to 3 or 4 dozen lenders to find a lender to finance it, because at $9.35, the returns were just so slim. So what staff has done, and they put it in the report, is the same thing they did 10 years ago. They hired a consultant. The consultant did an analysis. Kaiser Martin, led by Kathy Head, came out with some projections. 10 years ago, the projections had a fatal error in that she was...
Ryan, if you can start wrapping up.
Okay.
Your light's red.
Okay. So we took deja vu, come back to today, and there's 2 glaring errors in her analysis. On page 2 of her study, she concludes that land in Santa Ana is $2 million an acre. We haven't paid $2 million an acre since 2010. Land today is $5 or $6 million an acre. If you make the adjustment, it sends the fee all the way down to 0.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
That's 3 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Sam Romero, followed by Guadalupe Rico, followed by Cesar Medina.
Good evening, folks. The man said, my name is Sam.
Sam, before you start Sam's clock again. So there's a light right in front of you, a little light bar, and it goes from green to yellow to red. Once it's red, it turns, that's 3 minutes, that's exhausted. And so I just want to make sure everybody pays attention to that. That's why we have those 3. We want to be fair to everybody, that everybody has an equal amount of time. That's the reason why we make that visible.
Okay, then
I'm sorry, Sam, go right ahead.
Okay, real quick. 1920s, the zone in Logan was given M2, with nothing happened in Logan for a long, long time. Around 1947, there was a freeway commonly known as a 5, okay? There was a bridge built over on Lincoln Street in the neighborhood. A lot of families were misplaced, not only in Lincoln, Logan, and Custer. Homes were lost, okay? Time went on, okay? In 47, like I say, the bridge was built. We didn't think anything of it until many, many years later. Okay. All of a sudden, the city buys 3 lots on Custer Street. First, we couldn't figure out what it was for. What it was for is Civic Center will then connect to the freeway, which is a 45-degree angle, and kick out a lot more people. Meantime, with that M2 zone, it was changing from residents to businesses, some like garbage disposal, water disposal. We could smell it all the time, drip it into the ground. Nothing happened, okay? So what we're asking with the folks, try to make something bad into good now. Help us bring that as a residential 100% what we had before. Like I said, we got a lot of businesses come in, and we're asking for funding for that. May it be through maybe the money that's taken out of, was it per square foot, $5, whatever it is, put into a special fund to make something good that the city did wrong many, many years ago. And I could go on and on forever, and I'm willing to do a presentation of how the city got the short end of the stick for generations, okay? So please consider Logan to rebuild it, to bring it back up the way it was when I was a kid, when it was about 97% residential. So that's it, folks. We need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Guadalupe Rico, followed by Cesar Medina, followed by Jonathan Shum. Guadalupe? César Medina.
Sí, César Medina.
Adelante, creo que Guadalupe no está.
No viene después de mí.
¿Viene? Bueno, adelante.
Buenas tardes, señor alcalde, miembro del honorable consejo. Soy César Medina, de la organización Sullivan en Acción, y estamos aquí para felicitarle, alcalde, señores miembros, por la iniciativa y el estudio que están haciendo, celebrar esa decisión, esa voluntad de querer ayudar a la población de Santa Ana, porque a todos nos consta que por la necesidad que hay muchas casas, muchas viviendas que subarriendan 3, 4 y hasta 5, tienen 5 subarrendatarios, lo cual no es conveniente, no se vive bien. ¿Por qué? No hay privacidad, lo fundamental, hay una utilización común de todas las familias, sobre todas las áreas. Total, tendrán que darme la razón, no se puede vivir bien así. Queremos que en esta iniciativa de viviendas asequibles se tomen en cuenta las mobile home. Yo vivo en una mobile home, en el espacio 30, de un parque que se llama Country Club. No vengo a hablar de los problemas internos que hay en el Country Club. Vengo solamente, y estoy aquí es para apoyar vuestra iniciativa, tomando en cuenta de que en Santa Ana se puede vivir mejor. Y una de las buenas posibilidades es de que mucha gente tenga una forma de vivir digna. Apoyamos el ajuste de $5 a 15 porque va a tener más recursos la ciudad. Queremos también agradecer por las iniciativas que han tenido ustedes para el control de renta. Quisiéramos también que estas iniciativas se amplíen hacia el control del agua, que en este caso es alto para nosotros, aunque sabemos que las corporaciones sí ganan, pero esa ganancia no la transmiten a nosotros, sino que se queda con ellos. Y para finalizar, queremos de que esta idea se socialice más para que podamos tener por lo menos lleno este salón. Yo recién me enteré hace media hora de esta ordenanza. He venido al apuro, no solamente para participar o tener la aprobación de ustedes o de alguien en especial, sino para que el alcalde y ustedes tengan el apoyo justamente de quienes lo hemos llevado al sitio donde ustedes están sentados, o sea, el pueblo. Porque en Santa Ana se puede vivir mejor. Gracias, señores.
Gracias.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Cesar Medina, and I'm here to congratulate you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council members. I am a member of a group called Sullivan in Action, and I want to here to support this initiative that you are considering. We would like to collaborate because we want to have a better Santa Ana, and we know that there's a big need in housing, affordable housing. There's housing with subleasing, with 3, 4, and 5 subleases within a unit, a house. And this is not practical because, well, for one, there's no privacy. There's less common places to live, and people just do not live well like this. This is important. And we'd like for you to include in your initiative mobile homes. I live in a mobile home myself, Country Club, space number 30. And I'm not here to talk about the problems inside this place, but here to support your initiative. We want Santa Ana to, we know that Santa Ana we can live better in Santa Ana with dignified housing. We support you increasing the fee from $5 to $15 because this way the city will have more money. And we want to thank you for the rent control measures, that initiatives that you have implemented. And we want you to extend those to water because water is very high for us. Of course, corporations make a lot of money, but they don't share this money with us. So, and I also like to make this more public because we want to fill this room because we are here to support you in what you're doing, because you are here because of the people, Mayor and City Council, and we want to support you.
Thank you for that. Guadalupe Rico, followed by Jonathan Shun, followed by John Hanna. Madam Clerk, I think we'll we may need a translator, I'm not sure.
Buenas tardes nuevamente. Quiero dar muchas gracias a todos los miembros del concilio y por escucharnos una vez más. Como decía mi hermano aquí, César, pienso que sí es una prioridad el que por favor pongan un stop al incremento de la renta. Yo llegué pagando $225 y ahorita estoy pagando $1,500. ¿A dónde vamos a llegar? Tengo un negocio en la calle 4 y estoy pensando en moverme porque esto es extremadamente, es un problema grande. ¿A dónde nos van a mandar a los de la ciudad de Santa Ana? Tengo mucho amor en la ciudad de Santa Ana. Mis hijos han crecido aquí. He visto crecer a muchos adolescentes, pero si el incremento de la renta no para aquí, pues a los que vivimos aquí en Santa Ana nos están haciendo que nos vayamos a Riverside, a Corona, mientras nuestros hijos han crecido aquí. En cuanto también a las utilidades, pagamos mucho de agua y la comunidad o el lugar a donde yo vivo se le paga a la ciudad de Santa Ana y pagamos mucho dinero de agua. A veces me llega el bill de $220 de agua. Y quisiera ver usted, Vicente Sarmiento, que nos ayude. Como ya la vez pasada vine y le pedí de favor, que es un grito desesperado nuevamente el que estamos pidiendo. Y usted como mayor creo que tiene la posibilidad de extendernos la mano a la gente necesitada. Les doy muchas gracias por escucharme. Hasta luego, buenas tardes.
Gracias.
Good evening. Thank you to the City Council for listening to us. As my brother Cesar just said, we are here for you to make this a priority, to stop the rent increases. When I came here, I used to pay $225. Now I pay $1,500. That's a big jump. I have a business on 4th Street, and I am thinking of moving because this is just untenable. This is not sustainable. Where are we going to go? My kids, I love Santa Ana. My kids grew up here, but if the rents keep increasing and there's no control over that, we're going to have to move to Riverside, to Corona, or somewhere else. Also, the utilities are very high. Water is very high. The community, we pay water to the city of Santa Ana, and it's a lot of money. For water, sometimes I pay $220 just for water. And Mr. Vicente Sarmiento, I think you can help us. We're coming back again. This is a desperate cry, and we're coming to you as mayor because we think you can help. You can help us. So thank you all for listening to us.
Great. Jonathan Shum, followed by John Hanna, followed by Francisco Gomez.
Good evening, Mayor Sarmiento and honorable council members. My name is Jonathan Shum, and I am a Senior Vice President at Related California, developer of affordable and market rate housing, along with mixed-use projects throughout California. My colleagues and I want to say thank you to the mayor and the council members and city staff for hosting this important work study session to review the proposed amendment to the Affordable Housing Opportunity and Creation Ordinance. As one of the largest producers of affordable housing in the state, Related recognizes the importance of generating safe and obtainable housing due to the ongoing housing crisis. We understand this after completing the 114 affordable housing units at Chiata Station District with the city of Santa Ana, Crossroads at Washington, an 83-unit public-private project under development with Santa Ana, and numerous projects throughout Orange County. Related California, along with a group of housing professionals, have carefully reviewed the proposed amendment and the materials presented at the July 6 City Council meeting. Based on our analysis, it became clear the supportable in lieu fee memo prepared by Kaiser Marston Associates did not have access to real-time market information and data to accurately determine the supportable in lieu fee amounts cited for high-density multifamily development. We wanted to reiterate that Kaiser Marston is a reputable affordable housing firm with years of experience and a firm that we have successfully worked with on projects in Orange County. That said, we all know that housing development takes time to implement and is subject to multiple variables and nuances. As a result, we would like to take the opportunity to continue the dialogue and work with city staff, Kaiser Marston, and other stakeholders to refine the fee analysis to ensure all parties and the public are working with the accurate set of facts and assumptions. This will enable the city to propose and approve an amendment supported by sound data and information, and ultimately generate the long-term and sustainable housing desired by the citizens of Santa Ana. Thank you.
Thank you for that. John Hanna, followed by Francisco Gomez, followed by Manuel Escamilla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. John Hanna, I'm representing the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters, who about 60,000 strong in the Southwestern United States and almost 1,000 here in Santa Ana. And we have a few of them here in the audience. I just want to make a few observations. I want to thank the council for looking at this again. There was a study, and it talked about what's happened in the last year. But one thing is that I found interesting was that part of that original ordinance talked about an aspirational use of skilled and trained workforce for the labor force. That wasn't even looked at all to measure whether that had even been utilized. And I think it was kind of an aspirational afterthought, but we thought it should have at least been measured. I think that Santa Ana had the answer. And one of the problems is that in the residential construction industry, half the families of construction workers total are enrolled in safety net programs in our country and in California, whereas only a third of other workers are. And according to the UC Berkeley study this year, they found that structural features of the residential sector incentivized a race to the bottom, and employees are now governed by the operating principle to reduce labor costs through whatever means possible. So in other words, we're subsidizing the taxpayers a lot of these residential developments. So what's the solution? I thought the Santa Ana Planning Commission had that, and now Councilmember Fan was very eloquent in getting that through. But unfortunately, when the council got to it, only now Mayor Sarmiento and Councilmember Mendoza voted to keep that mandatory language. So the aspirational was left. My suggestion is that you take a look at this, and if a developer does not want to use a skilled and trained labor force, then make them pay the 17 your study says that they can afford to pay. If they're willing to use a skilled and trained workforce as set forth in the California codes, then we should go back to the language that the Planning Commission suggested and allow them to have a reduction. The council may need to look at what rate that is, but it's an important thing to do. And I thought Mr. Medrano made a good point about having a local hire component. And in the language that you have here in the ordinance, there already is a local component of getting people to live in those housings. Why not make that a local component for people to work in it? So if you're going to raise it all the way and a little more for people who are not willing to use a skilled and trained workforce. If they are, I think you should give them some reduction. And what that should be, I think the council needs to make that determination. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Francisco Gomez, followed by Manuel Escamilla, followed by Celica Diaz.
Good evening, City Council. I do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today. I am a resident of Santa Ana, and because of the Carpenters Union and the wage I make, I was able to buy my home here. Very fortunate, especially this economy that these houses are going up, 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 and up. I was just fortunate when I bought at a low price. The other thing too is I'm also part of that skilled and trained labor that they're talking about. If it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be, especially if I'm not skilled or not trained, not being able to produce the type of work that I do. The third thing is also, a job like this will keep me home. You don't know how many hours we spend on the road, waking up early, getting to work and from work, especially if a lot of the majority of the work is in LA. Driving to LA is no problem. It takes me 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic and depending the time I get out of here. Coming home is the part where we get beat up a lot. We just get off of work, we get in our cars. And sometimes it's at anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours to 2.5 hours, depending on traffic, especially on a Friday afternoon. Sometimes we're just hoping that, let's see if our foreman lets us go home early. You know what I mean? So jobs like this will keep us local. I'll be spending my money local. I'll be buying my gas at a gas station locally. That's all revenue for the city of Santa Ana. I live on Euclid and First Street. I'm very borderline of Garden Grove, Westminster, Fountain Valley, and Costa Mesa. So anytime I get an opportunity to speak, especially on agendas like this, I say I'm a resident of all those cities, especially this one. The majority of my family lives here. My mom's side of the family are all in this area. I got a few on my dad that are also here. But we need these jobs so I can stay home. I got a 2-year-old daughter that I want to spend time with her in the afternoons, especially right now that the daylight is towards 7 o'clock. I want to come home to go play with her, take her to the park or things like that. And I got a newborn on the way. My wife's pregnant. So we need these jobs here. I'm done basically working in LA, but I'll work in LA because I got to feed my family. But a job like this will keep me home. And we need this. Thank you very much and have a good day. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Manuel Escamilla, followed by Celica Diaz.
Cool. All right. Hello, Mayor and Council. Good. Oh, okay. Sorry. Hello, Mayor and Council. Thanks for hosting this, and it's a very important topic for sure, with a lot of moving parts. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a political decision, obviously. There are a lot of kind of technical questions I'm hoping that you all can bring up during this discussion, so I'm going to try to get through those. The first of which is really just what this who is actually going to apply to. So in the staff report, it doesn't quite make it clear where these units or this fee is actually going to apply. I know it basically says everything that's been upzoned after 2011. So for a developer coming in, might not know exactly where their parcel is, so just developing a map or just some kind of very easy to use tool so that we know which parcels are actually going to be subject to this fee would be a good step. I don't see that in the staff report, but it would be good to discuss here. Just because it looks like most of the units are potential developments where this would apply have already been entitled. So we have probably about 2 different projects that might need to pay whatever this higher fee is if the fee is changed. So a little clarification on that. And in prior years, we saw that a lot of folks would pay the in-lieu fee rather than pay or develop anything on site, which to me indicates that as rational actors, from an economic perspective, developers will pay whatever costs less. So at a certain point, it made more sense to pay the fee rather than to develop on-site. So there might be a consideration for mandating on-site at a certain threshold. Again, what you're kind of proposing here, which I like, is that you're increasing cost as the units get larger. So we know larger projects have bigger impacts. We know that people tend to prefer smaller projects, so having that sliding scale is very helpful. But it might be worth considering making the mandate for on-site inclusionary housing at a certain point. I don't know what that point is, but that point should be addressed by the council. And 4, there used to be a provision for a local density bonus, which actually produced several units along East First in the Metro East area. I think there was some controversy as far as how many units that ended up producing, but it is another thing you can do locally to encourage the creation of affordable housing without actually costing the developers anything. So if it does pencil out for them, having that additional local density bonus was something that was in the WHO before, but is no longer in there. Let's see. 5, I do think that part of kind of creating a winning coalition around this idea is also adding additional language around rental protection. So right now that language seems to only apply when there's refurbishment, not necessarily redevelopment. So if someone comes in, gets a nice piece of property and develops 50 units on it, but there used to be 4 renters there, those renters have no protections already. So it might be worth considering having some additional protection there, right to return, right to remain, so forth. And number 6 is really just kind of yellow light. Okay. Number 6 and final point is, it's probably too late for about $40 million that would have come into the city. So the last decision that was made this last September, for my calculation, cost the city $38 million. So those are kind of the numbers that we're working with here. So having a really good idea on a project by project basis as far as what the final decision, what outcome will happen, I think is really important that we do this discussing real numbers. So with that, thank you for having me here. And I think I'm still within time.
Thank you. Celica Diaz.
Sorry. Hello. My name is Celica Diaz, and I live and work at the Pacific Park neighborhood. I work as a property manager for 4 different buildings that are located in the area. And I was asked to come here today to give perhaps just my opinion. I think that the fees are definitely too low. I know the developers are going to hate me, but I still think they're very, very low. For example, for a 5 to 9 unit, It's $6 a square footage. I think that's definitely ridiculous. But I would suggest that in lieu of them paying a fee, why not make sure that 15 to 20% of the new development or restored development becomes available for low-income housing. I would also like to see that we get or create more developments where they could be condominiums or townhomes. I would love to see more Serrano residents become homeowners, because the more homeowners that we have, it's the people care more about their community. So that is my take, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Celica. We had somebody who came in and there were no speaker cards out front, and I believe they came in just a few minutes late. So Eric Aldretti, you're our last speaker, in-person speaker, then we go to the online speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to delve further into the WHO. I was on the Planning Commission when the WHO was first considered, and I supported it then, and I support it now. I think a higher in lieu fee, closer to what Kaiser Marston suggested, is the way to go. And the reason why I say that, that's the 17 to 18. And the reason why I say that is because I would ask the council to consider a few sobering statistics. Nearly 54% of Santa Ana residents rent. In 2019, nearly 60% of renters were moderately or severely cost burdened, and now it's much worse in 2021. The gap between income and rent has increased substantially, and I think that's important to note because that figure is a key driver of poverty. And so I think we ought to consider that when we're making policy. The reality is clear. The vast majority of residents cannot afford the rent in this city. And while I think we're doing a good job in Santa Ana of creating affordable housing, we also have the greatest need in this area, more than our neighboring cities. So their policy failures can't dictate what we do. We have to do for our own residents. I think it's important to note that the WHO is one tool that we can use for affordable housing. I think the last figure was, and I don't know if this is final, it created 107 units at La Placita Cinco. It also created additional units at Santa Ana Arts Collective and other projects. And I think that's significant. While it doesn't satisfy the problem, it addresses it. And I don't think anything that we have in our tools to satisfy affordable housing can be addressed with one tool. We have to have many tools. And while I personally believe that the units ought to be built, but we shouldn't have an in lieu fee, we should have these units required to be built, I understand that there's flexibility that's needed. And I think that's what we're giving the developers through this process, is a flexible option to do the in lieu fee, and we can then take those in lieu fees and leverage for more affordable housing. I don't think the time now is the time to lower the in lieu fees. I think this is the time where we increase them from the 5 to the 18. And it's up to the council to decide whether or not that's the best policy, but I submit that it is. And I think now more than ever, it is desperate, and our residents are crying out for help, and I would ask that you help them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the last speaker. Madam Clerk, do we have any members of the public that wish to address the council that are online?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Speakers on the queue may provide their comments on the agenda item. When unmuted, please announce your name, ward, or neighborhood that you reside in within the city of Santa Ana for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. To request to speak, dial *9 from your phone or select raise hand from Zoom. Before unmuting callers, I'd like to begin by reporting the following summary of emails provided as of today. We received 1 residency not disclosed in support for non-Santa Ana residents, 1 residency not disclosed in opposition, and 1 non-Santa Ana resident in opposition. And with that, Zoom ID, T. O'Brien, if you would please proceed with your comment.
Yes, Mayor Sarmiento and council members, it's Tim O'Brien. I'm with Legacy Partners. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to first commend the prior city council for the support for the fee reduction. as many of you know, our Sunflower project was a beneficiary of the reduced fee. And this was at a time when the pandemic was at its highest point. This was a project that would not have started and would not be under construction today if it wasn't for that fee reduction. You know, and what is the result? I mean, there's hundreds of jobs, including union jobs, by the way, and $100 million worth of investment in the community. Not to mention the fact that, you know, the $900,000 fee that we paid was the first fee actually paid since the fee was increased to $15. So when it came down, that was the result. We do not have a project in the city at this time, but when I see the proposal for the fee increase, you know, coupled with the skilled labor requirement, which to the market equates to union housing, what we see is cost increases here, which aren't supported by the rent that's in the market. And I think the KMA study is inaccurate. It's misdirected because when it really, these fees and increased fees, any kind of impact fee really impacts landowners. We developers work on a static fee, or a static return basis. So unless the rents are higher in the market, you won't build. And the lack of new developments will just put more and more pressure on your city. So, you know, it really concerns me to see that. And so in any event, you really have a great historical case study. When you raise the fees to $15, it stopped housing development. When they were lowered for a period of time, it stimulated it. And so I think you know it'll be important to find the right balance and right policy. So anyways, I do appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate your prior support and our ability to get the Sunflower project started. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID, Jose, if you would please select the microphone icon to unmute your call. Persona con el nombre José, por favor seleccione el icono de micrófono para activar el sonido en el aparato. Zoom ID Simon, if you would please select your microphone icon to unmute your call. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Simon Garcia.
Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we could hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
Yeah, my name is Simon Garcia, and I do recommend that, you know, you guys keep that wages at that, because I'm a skilled carpenter. You know, I live here in Santa Ana. I was raised here in Santa Ana. I've lived here for 30 years, and I've seen this city change, you know, and I became a carpenter, skilled carpenter, you know. So I recommend that I stay, you know, the wages go up, because I need these jobs to stay local I don't have to drive so far to work. So I recommend that the rate go to $18, and I would really like that to happen here. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID Jennifer Ward with OCBC, if you would please select the microphone icon to unmute your device. Zoom ID Jennifer Ward, if you would please select the microphone icon to unmute your device, and you may proceed with your comment. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hi, this is Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. If you want to proceed with your comment, please.
Oh, sorry about that. I was having a connection problem. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Ward, and I'm Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Government Affairs with the Orange County Business Council. Appreciate the opportunity to comment tonight, and I just wanted to add my comments. I'm sure I don't need to tell you all as leaders in your community about the importance of addressing the housing crisis in California as well as the city. It's a topic in particular that the Orange County Business Council cares deeply about and has done a lot of research and work on promoting anything and everything to enable the production of more housing in California to address that issue and that challenge, especially here in Orange County. So I just wanted to support some of the comments that were included in the Building Industry Association of Orange County's letter and ask that we do have an opportunity to conduct further analysis and to really look at the financial impacts of an increase in the in lieu fee. We were happy to support the reduction of the fee last year that the council approved and would like to, like I said, see a little bit more of that economic impact analysis because you do have a lot of experts from the building and development community at your disposal to get information about what it really impacts the ability to build here in Orange County and Santa Ana on the ground. So would it support working with them on looking at those impacts before increasing the fee. Thank you very much. Sorry again for the technical difficulties.
Thank you. Zoom ID Biff Baker, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device.
Yes, thank you. You can hear me?
Yes, we could hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
My name is Biff Baker. I am a longtime parishioner at the Episcopal Church of the Messiah in Santa Ana and a volunteer with OCO, the Orange County Congregations Community Organization. And I'm here to make a public comment in favor of prioritizing support for affordable housing. By affordable housing, I mean specifically for the levels designated low income and very low income. And I understand we now have a new designation, extremely low income, and I would certainly include that in this advocacy. In OCO, we get a lot of education on a variety of important topics, but among them, we've had the opportunity to study and learn about the housing element and how it influences housing construction in Santa Ana. As I'm sure many of you are aware, if you've studied this, the most recent housing element 8 years ago, 7 years ago, set guidelines for construction of low-income and very low-income housing, as well as for other income levels. During the period that they were in effect, the guidelines for low-income and very low-income housing were not fulfilled, not even close, whereas the guidelines for medium and higher-income housing were over-fulfilled to a significant degree. And if you haven't looked at this, I definitely recommend taking a look at it. I've had the opportunity over the last 30 plus years to witness various changes that have taken place in Santa Ana. And I love Santa Ana. I love it more than the place I live. Right now, we see people who have been part of the fabric of life in this city who are being forced to leave by the increased cost of housing. And one of the ladies who spoke in person, I'm afraid I missed her name, but she testified to that. Others who remain often live crammed into inadequate buildings in undignified conditions, as Senora Medina described a few minutes ago. In the wake of the pandemic, many people face eviction, threatening to aggravate the homelessness crisis. The vision that many of us wish to promote for Santa Ana is a city that offers a healthy, sustainable, and dignified life for all of its residents, with regulatory structures in place to ensure that people live in conditions none of us would recoil at, with green spaces and a community life and thriving small businesses and safe streets and excellent schools. As part of that vision, we urge you to prioritize support for affordable housing for the low income and very low income and also the extremely low income communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Zoom ID Eric Nelson, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Eric Nelson on behalf of the BIA. I want to speak tonight about this proposal. The last project I built in Santa Ana included a fee of well over $1.5 million that went right towards affordable housing and equated to what was amounted to about $7 a square foot. And with that in mind, I have some concerns with some of the key elements in the KMA study that I think must be addressed before concluding anything. As the baseline and justification for your fee is off the prototype, and it should be a realistic one based on similar projects with similar comps. That's not the case here, though. And if you go to the list of the previous projects used to justify this increase, which can be found in Appendix A, you'll see the stark difference. I mean, the prototype project's 36 units to the acre. And then when you look at the list of projects that are compared to, you have the one at 607 North Garvey's 18 units to the acre. 1642 New Hope is 14 to the acre. 1016 Hope Lane is a detached housing project of 9 to the acre. Take a minute and Google all of the sites for yourself, and you're going to see real quickly that they're far different than the study that was analyzed. And none of these are really a close comparison to the prototype, and in many cases are located in other cities with material different costs and revenue implications. Be curious, ask yourself, and moreover, ask your consultants why the analysis included prototypical projects not found in Santa Ana, a project that wouldn't be allowed in most of your residential districts at a density that doesn't work in Santa Ana for the simple fact that the revenues fall below costs. Ask yourselves, do you want to implement a policy that results in projects that don't meet even CalPERS minimum requirements for returns? You know, CalPERS heavily invests in residential projects, and they wouldn't invest at the return rates suggested in the study. The underwriting also references project returns based on costs. And I think that's an important thing to know, because what it shows is a lack of detailed understanding of home building, the public markets, and acceptable returns. And our profit is a profit based on net revenue, not development costs, which means that profit on the prototype project that's compared is not 8.5%. It's actually less. It's 8%, or it's less than 8%. And the justified return to base the fee off results in sub 5%. And it's important also to note that that didn't include labor restrictions. These are critical because the prototype relies on density, but doesn't account for the impact on revenue. Density increases, so do the costs. The costs go up, and we all know that because many people are living under the same roof, sharing the same walls and the same floors, the requirements are much higher fire resistance, noise, seismic structure, and at the same time, your value goes down. So one thing that's super clear is that the projects aren't similar, and you really got to look at that. You know, nobody's saying don't do any fees, but it's got to be measured, and it's got to be one that's sustainable. And we don't believe, I certainly don't believe, that this is a sustainable strategy, nor will it result in any fundamental increase in housing or fees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the last three numbers, 925. If you would please select *6 to unmute your call, or select the microphone icon to unmute your call. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hello, my name is Concepcion Rodriguez, and I am a resident of Santa Ana. I live in a lazy neighborhood. I agree with the changes that the committee is recommending to make the housing ordinance stronger. We need more affordable housing for our families in Santa Ana, and not housing at market costs. The changes will ensure that the ordinance does what it was originally intended to do in a way that benefits our community. I ask the council to accept the recommendations and continue with the process of amending the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID, Yolanda Martinez, if you would please select the microphone icon to unmute your call. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment. Zoom ID, Yolanda Martinez, you have successfully unmuted your call. If you would please proceed with your comment. Zoom ID, Yolanda Martinez.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was having some issues. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Irlanda Martinez. I am a commissioner with the Community Development and Housing Commission. I'm also a public policy consultant specializing in affordable housing, and I'm a resident of Santana. First off, I wanted to congratulate staff and the ad hoc committee on some great recommendations. I think that you're all pushing us in the right direction. I also wanted to address two things on the suggested changes. My only concern is that the trigger that is included in the language, I don't think it would be a good thing. I wholeheartedly believe that the inclusionary requirement should apply to all new development above 4 units and not just those that go above the density requirement. Although I know developers will gasp at the thought of all new development being required to have an affordable housing requirement, when we think about it, that would only generate a number of units equivalent to 15% at most of all new development. If you ask me, that's really not a lot. And yes, building affordable housing is expensive, but the money generated in the market rate development business is also significant. I would also like to encourage the city to add a provision that allows for WHO funds to be used to support our local community land trust, which would help further our efforts to develop more affordable housing in the city. I also wanted to address some arguments that are often brought to the table and that we have already heard against inclusionary housing. The first would be that increasing fees will discourage development. I think that this is often used by developers to instill fear in communities by making us believe that if we don't play by the rules, the game is over. However, I would argue that the reason all of these folks showed up tonight is because developers have turned Santa Ana into a gentrification hotspot ready for exploitation, and their profits are being threatened. Santa Ana isn't a city that suffers from a shortage of developer interest, and everybody wants to build here, so the city has leverage. Frankly, if developers say that housing development will be discouraged over increased fees, I say let's find out. The second argument is that more supply will lead to lower rents. And while there is a small truth to that, the market will not regulate itself in time to make rents affordable. You don't have to take this from me, though. San Francisco's chief economist, Ted Egan, conducted a study in 2012 where he determined that the city would have to build 100,000 units by 2020 to significantly increase affordability at large. For reference, that is how many units San Francisco had built since 1920, which was almost 100 years. So Egan also mentioned that there were other solutions like down payment
15 seconds left.
Program, which is $75,000 and subsidized below market rate housing for a quarter of the market. And we are only looking at 15%. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you. Zoom ID Victor Cow, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device.
Hello.
Hi, thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Sarmiento and members of the City Council. My name is Victor Cow. I represent the California Apartment Association. The California Apartment Association represents over 70,000 professionals in the rental housing industry who own, operate, and develop multifamily housing. Our members represent over 2 million units of market rate and affordable housing throughout the state of California. We appreciate Santa Ana's efforts to ensure the city has the proper tools to meet its affordable housing needs. We do have some concerns that we would request that you look further into. Namely, are the assumptions that are in the KMA study. As my colleagues from the Building Industry Association have pointed out, there was a period where the fee was $15 an hour and not one permit was issued. Many of those permits that were pulled were grandfathered into an older fee. And then secondly, while new projects were entitled, very exciting projects that were entitled in this period, again, not one permit was pulled under the old fee of $15 an hour. Developers want to do business with the city, but they can only do so when it's economically feasible. As it was commented, these units, the fees essentially get paid by renters and home buyers. It's essentially a tax. the higher regulatory costs only foster an environment where only high income and luxury housing is developed. That is essentially the consequence of challenging regulatory environments. And you see the stratification up and down the state where more high income and luxury developments, smaller units that are being developed, which is very counterintuitive to the stated goals of the ad hoc committee that in which you identified, which is you want larger three bedroom units to accommodate families within the community. The concern, again, is that these are all job killing and housing killing policies. You may, for the developments that are economically feasible, again, they're paying higher construction costs and therefore charging higher rents. And then some of those monies may trickle down into this inclusionary housing fee. And so when you look at this multiplier, if the regulatory environment is so challenging that there's zero permits that are being pulled, then there are $0 going into that fund. Therefore, that is something that you would have to look into. So it's important that we look at the assumptions of the fee study and look at real comps, as some of the other speakers have alluded to.
15 seconds left.
Issue is exacerbating the issue where middle income buyers and renters are forced to either buy up or down, meaning that they are either buying up and reaching to be more housing burdened, or they're renting down and essentially gentrifying into lower housing stock. The central issue is supply and demand. And so we look forward to having this further discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID Santi Kamjin, if you would please select the microphone icon. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Santi Kamjin, and I'm the current president of the Building Industry Association's Orange County chapter, and I'm a residential developer with thousands of units under development throughout the state. Undeniably, our state, our county, and your city are in the midst of a severe housing crisis driven by a lack of supply. While the reasons for the lack of supply may seem complex, at the end of the day, it's rather simple. A housing crisis because of housing policy decisions made by local officials just like yourselves. All too often, politically popular and usually with good intent, elected policymakers make the decision to burden new housing development. In nearly every instance, these policies, just like the WHO that's being discussed tonight, effectively limit new supply by making new development financially unfeasible. Now, I understand there may be apprehension by some to take the word of an industry advocate and a real estate developer. But the city's been down this path before, and the results are crystal clear. Just look at the city's own data. Look at what happened with the old fees, and then look what happened when they were decreased. When the city made the prudent but unpopular decision to reduce the WHO fee, a significant number of units started to move forward again. The bottom line is if you want to stifle new development, collect zero in fees, then by all means move forward with the proposal that is being recommended. However, if you want to actually see new units built and some fees collected, then don't change the current policy. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for your service to your community, and best of luck.
Thank you. Zoom ID Cesar Covarrubias, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device to unmute your call.
Thank you. Good evening, council members and Mayor Sarmiento. Thank you for taking this important discussion. Today, we, as the Kennedy Commission, would like to support the recommended or recommendations to change the fee and also the application to ensure that Santana has the ability to meet housing needs in the community. As was mentioned earlier by most of the comments from developers, their intent is not to build housing for Santana residents who need affordable housing. Their intent is to build market rate housing that's going to produce the best profit for them. Just as a quick reminder, 80% of the population, Santana falls into what's called the low and very low income category, since most of the families in Santana make around $70,000 or less a year. So it's important to make sure that when we are doing this, we're thinking about why we are trying to make these changes. You're trying to make these changes to create balance in housing development. Santana has done a tremendous job in creating opportunities for development, as is evidenced by all developers participating on this call and the amount of development that's happening in the city. What the community continues to focus on and to voice is that housing that's being produced is not affordable. And so therefore we need affordable housing. And in the case of development, developers are saying, we don't want to produce housing that's affordable. We would rather pay a fee. So you, Santana, you have the burden to provide housing for your residents, because we're providing housing for other folks who can afford higher rents. So if that is the case, I would also want to remind folks who are citing the study that there's a very key part of the study that indicates that the cost to produce an affordable housing or a market rate unit could be anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000 per unit. Yet the fee that's being placed, even if it's at $17 or $18, is asking a developer to pay a percentage, roughly about 4% or 5% of what it would cost to develop affordable housing in your city, and saying, here's the 4% city, you go find all the other funding sources. And that's important because today, in today's budget, or the budget that the governor proposed, he proposed $12 billion for affordable housing and homelessness. And there's federal resources that are also coming down the pike. But Santana will only be able to leverage that money to create affordable housing if you have your local funding. And that's where it's crucial that you have a fee that is representative of what would allow you to be able to leverage that funding. And $5 a square foot is not allowing you to leverage a lot of money. It'll take years for you to build
10 seconds left.
A fund that would allow you to then leverage the funding that's available. Thank you for your participation in this great need in the city.
Thank you. Zoom ID Isuri Ramos, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Isuri Ramos. I am a resident of the city of Santana and a member of the Planning Commission. I come to you tonight to speak in support of strengthening the Housing Opportunity Ordinance. We heard developers thank the previous council for the fee reduction, and I want to remind the council and the public that just before the fee was reduced, city staff held stakeholder meetings in 2019, and staff's recommendation was to increase the new fee from the then $15 and to remove triggers so that the HOO would apply to all new residential development over 4 or 5 units. As you consider your options, I ask that you reflect on the great need that exists within the city and the pleas from community residents for relief from this housing crisis. For-profit and market rate developers have called in tonight in their self-interest and not in the interest of Santana's most vulnerable residents. I support the ad hoc's recommendations, and I ask that you go beyond them. Developers can afford a fee at $17 or $18, and the HO should apply to all new residential development over 5 units, as your city staff was recommending in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID OCCCO, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Good evening, Mayor Sarmiento and honorable members of the council. My name is Karen Alvarado, and I am the lead organizer for Orange County Congregation Community Organization, also known as OCO. I work with faith-based leaders in the city of Santa Ana, many of whom are low income, or as categorized also, very low income residents. They are folks that are committed to the well-being of their communities and enrich the city of Santa Ana. I am here to urge the council to approve the increase of affordable housing units for low-income and very low-income residents, as the ad hoc committee study recommends. This investment in our most vulnerable communities will be a great first step to help end the cycle of poverty for our residents As I'm sure most of you know, our folks spend well over 50% of their income on housing with minimal spending power. So affordable housing, as I've heard tonight, unfortunately, is a topic that's largely misunderstood by folks that oppose it. And there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about what this development is based primarily on fear around negative stereotypes, property values, and the change it brings to neighborhoods, all of which are common arguments in opposition to new affordable housing for our community. However, is that the lack of safe and affordable housing is one of the major reasons residents are driven out of the city, also lose potential workers and discourage growth in their local economies and not increase it. So as you know, we, beyond these well-studied facts, our multi-faith community believes it is our moral obligation to support those that need it most. And we're all trying to recover from one of the hardest times coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we've seen before, Santa Ana was one of the hardest hit cities. So we are here to stand with our brothers and sisters who are still struggling to get back on their feet because we refuse to engage in creative and compassionate ways to help meet the pledge that you all made at the beginning of this meeting to serve and to provide liberty and justice for all. And housing justice with dignity cannot be the exception. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Zoom ID, Stephen Lamotte, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
Mayor, City Council members, thank you so much. I just had a neat procedure. Otherwise, I'd be there in person. So thank you for allowing the remote option. It is still very beneficial. Steve Lamont, Building Industry Association of Orange County Executive Officer. As you know, we submitted a letter. It was referenced a couple times. And I just kind of wanted to go over a couple of those points. I've kind of lost count of how many times, we've talked about this issue at the City Council because it's only been a year since this policy was brought forward to the City Council because it was drastically hurting development. People, a couple speakers have said, let's see what would happen. But as you know, the amendment responded to a simple fact, which was no permits were pulled after the 2015 increase. 2,900 units were approved, and this is directly from staff, but yet not one permit was pulled. So in effect, this means no new housing units at all are moving forward. No new affordable dollars are going into the city accounts. And this has been said multiple times. So, I guess we're having trouble in terms of why this would come back to the city with amendments that are even more drastic than before. I mean, in going through this policy, you're looking to apply the fee to smaller developments. You're of course looking to increase the fee for the 20 units or more projects, looking to mandate a certain type of labor, benefiting a small group, which would just make it more difficult and more expensive to build the units. And I know this council is very aware of what the BIA would say and what we obviously think about this policy in general. And we're not talking about going to zero. We're just talking about keeping the policy, where it is and where it's been working. But I know you're aware of this. And so we're trying to figure out why. And so we have technical data supported by Kaiser Marston or KMA that we had some of our members look at. And I know some developers have referenced it in the past. And I just want to touch on some of the discrepancies that, we have seen and is in detail in the letter that I submitted. And please keep in mind, our members, the developers, they're literally building these projects. They're looking at the land, they're employing people, they're paying these fees. And, with all due respect, I'm not aware of Kaiser Marston, doing this. And so in looking at some of the assumptions, as was kind of mentioned prior, the acquisition and the land costs are significantly understated. And they're, BIA members, the actual projects demonstrate higher land costs, upwards of 100,000.
15 seconds left.
Realistic. Construction costs are significantly understated. Parking costs are understated, and they don't even state what type of parking they're actually referencing, which if you look at underground or above or on the ground, all of them are drastically different in terms of cost. And so this study needs to be looked at. It's a little scary that the city paid for this in terms of the baselines to actually create and
Thank you
vote
for your
on the
comment. Your time is up. Zoom ID Carla Juarez, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carla Juarez, and I am a resident of Santana from Ward 4. Thank you for letting me be here. I'm not sure why. Sorry. So we said that when we said we wanted more housing, we didn't say we wanted more housing. We said we wanted housing that is affordable. A person who earns minimum wage cannot afford to live by themselves. $15 an hour for 40 hours times 4.3 weeks gives you $2,580. That's before taxes. After taxes at 15% gives you $2,193. Most places require for you not to spend more than 30% of your income in rent. In this scenario, after the 30%, you would only be able to pay $658 for a place. I only see rooms being rented around that price, and they don't rent to senior folks or family with a kid or kids. Majority of the Santa Ana residents are renters. About 30% of Santa Ana are rent burning. I recommend for the required amount for affordable housing units to be in this, the WHO, to be increased to at least 30%. In the event that the developer does not want poor residents, low-income families in their community, and would rather pay to not have them live there, to not have low-income families live in their units, I recommend that the fee, the in-lieu fee, to be larger than the total cost to build 30% affordable low-income units. This would help as an incentive to the developers to be inclusive by building affordable housing on site. But if they still would rather pay their fees to not have low-income families live there, I recommend the money from the in-lieu fees be collected and go to investing in community land trust. A community land trust is owned by the community in the city, and is a strategy to make sure that the affordable housing is built and is beneficial and responsive to the local residents and neighborhoods. A community land trust has a community control through the community land trust model, and would give local residents greater oversight into the management and even play affordable housing. It would help build affordable housing. I also want to, the RENA numbers, if you look at those, which is the required amount of housing to build, there's 6 times the amount of housing being built for medium income and above income housing, and not even close to that number for low-income families. So I'm saying that we're focusing on making profit, and it should be people over profit. I mean, people over profit should be our goal during our time on earth. It is the lives that we affect that will have the greatest ripple in time. So how are we investing in the greatest assets? Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID Daisy Cruz, if you would please select the microphone icon to unmute your device.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
Awesome. Good evening, Mayor Sarmiento and City Council and members of the community. My name is Daisy, and I'm with the Kennedy Commission, and I'm calling in to support the proposed amendments to the Housing Opportunity Ordinance. The City of Santana is a renter majority city, and despite the city's progress towards meeting its regional housing needs assessment, RENA allocation for very low and low income housing, there continues to be a great need for housing that is affordable to its residents. The current pandemic has increased the economic and housing pressures on low-income families in Santa Ana. While the city has seen an increase in production of affordable housing, there has been a larger increase in above moderate housing, with average rents of $2,000 to $4,000. None of these above market rental units are affordable to most of Santa Ana's working families. The city needs to update the in lieu fee from $5 to $15 or above to be in line with a fee that is fair and allows the city to create the in lieu fund that will help build affordable housing for its residents. The proposed fee is in line with the region's in lieu fees, and it has been recommended based on a feasibility study of Santa Ana's housing and real estate market. The WHO should also apply to all residential developments in the city. Additionally, the city needs to make new construction of affordable housing a priority when using the housing fund to increase availability of housing options for Santa Ana residents. Diversion of these funds to other programs will not be directly related to increasing and improving the supply of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID Lucero, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device to unmute. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hi, my name is Lucero Garcia Mondragon, and I'm a board member of the very first and only community land trust in the city of Santana, Thrive Santana, which has been formed to include the residents and center their voices in the development of land. And I'm here to communicate that the city of Santana needs more affordable housing and not less, with stronger requirements for developers to provide affordable housing for Santana's low-income residents, and more units at deeper affordability. It's important for the city of Santana to include community land trusts such as Thrive Santana in the distribution of affordable housing funds to ensure affordable housing projects to respond to local residents' needs and concerns. And funds from the Housing Opportunity Ordinance should include, again, community land trusts as a strategy to make sure affordable housing is beneficial and responsive to local residents and neighborhoods. And community control through a CLT model would give local residents greater oversight into the management and even playing field with affordable housing developers. So please, I ask you to consider my comments and the comments of those who have spoken before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID Jesus Santana, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hello, Mayor and council members. I think for me, I just want to say thank you for inviting the Sullivan Acción group. I'm a community member. I'm a community organizer who's been trying to support the Sullivan community. And again, the Sullivan community is a unique community in regards to housing. It has mobile homes, apartments, condominiums, and single family homes. And I think when we talk about affordable housing, we also got to address the cost of utilities as well, and ensure that when we are creating these new properties, for development overall, is how can we make sure that there's programs that are regulated by the city? Because sometimes, for example, with the mobile homes like Guadalupe, who was sharing earlier, they have an issue with the water, and they're unsure on who to address, or who to go to, because when they try addressing it with their mobile home manager, they tell them, we can't help you. And when they've gone to the city, they're like, we're sorry, we can't help you. So I think it's making sure that moving forward, when we talk about, creating more affordable housing, how can we make sure that these, utilities like water, electricity, gas are also, thought about, because we need to make sure that we are doing more than we can to support our community now. And I think moving forward, I would support, and I am in favor of the recommendations that the ad hoc has proposed, as well as the community land trust. I think funds should definitely go towards that. because we don't need no more property owners who don't live here or who don't know the community at all. We need to make sure that people who own property are our people, Santaneros. I think overall it's time that we need to make sure we are allowing our people to get the dignity they deserve. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Zoom ID, Luis Sarmiento, if you would please select the microphone icon to unmute your device. Thank you. You may proceed with your comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
Thank you very much. My name is Luis Sarmiento. I'm program manager for our community land trust, Thrive Santana. And thank you for hearing us tonight. I believe that the COVID-19 pandemic showed us a lot about who we are as a city, and showed us a lot about the right way to take care of our most vulnerable community members, and how that is a way to take care of all of us. And the same thing can be said about housing development. We know that there is a need for housing for the lower income brackets in our city. The rolling back of the affordable housing requirements was one of the actions of the if I remember correctly, of some of the outgoing city council members who were pushing us in a different direction. And I want to believe that the current city council knows better and understands that we need to work with developers who want to work with the community. If there are developers who don't want to, to build affordable housing, and who don't want to work with local residents, then we don't want them here either. We want to work with those developers who understand the importance of partnering with residents. And that's also why we are including the request to include the community land trust as a potential strategy within the WHO, as a way to make sure that affordable housing development is also happening in partnership with local residents. And we could talk about a lot of numbers about the need for housing for lower income families. We know that Santana is a majority renter city, that 2 out of 3 renters are rent burdened. 1 out of 3 are extremely rent burdened, and with families that make between $20,000 and $35,000 a year, 95% of those families are rent burdened. And so these are the families that make Santana who we are, and these are the families that you're hearing from tonight. And so we invite you to make the right decisions when it comes to the Housing Opportunities Ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoom ID, Dave, if you would please select the microphone icon on your device to unmute your call.
Mayor Sarmiento and council members, Dave Elliott, Santa Ana Chamber of Commerce. I think you hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. You may proceed with your comment.
Well, just an observation or a comment. We've all come through, and we're still coming through the pandemic. And my concern is that we start putting additional regulatory things on our businesses, as well as additional fees and taxes. I don't think this is the time to do that right now. I think there's further study that can be done based on what the BIA has shared. I read through their report earlier this afternoon, and I think that there's some things in there that we need to look at further before we go back and increase the fee. I am just concerned that we need housing. We all agree we need housing. We need affordable housing. But how we get there, we're not maybe on the same page right now. I'm concerned that when we were at $15, we were getting no business. And when we dropped it to $5, we started getting a little business when it comes to our affordable housing opportunities. So I'm just concerned about the adding additional regulations right now, the timing of this, especially. And we just had this discussion over just a little over a year ago. And my understanding is right prior to that, we were getting nothing when it comes to the $15 fee. But since then, at the $5 fee, we've had a couple of projects and some income that has come from that. So that's my concern. In moving forward, that we not just jump on this right now, but we give it a little bit more time and further study. Again, it's not a good time coming out of the pandemic, and we're still not out of the pandemic to increase fees, taxes, regulation. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing, and appreciate and we'll continue to support all the decisions and things that you make there at City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, that was the last speaker.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let me go ahead and just bring it back to the council and staff, and I wanted to ask staff if there's anything that they'd like to provide in addition to what they presented early on, or was everything fairly comprehensive? I know we've spoken about this previously, but to the extent there's something that staff would like to add, that would be appreciated.
The only thing we wanted to add was to provide some of the next steps if the council, as a body, provide directions for us tonight with information on how to make the changes. We are prepared to work through the ordinance, and our estimated timeline is that we can initiate the public hearing process between 45 to 60 days if we get clear direction tonight on how to proceed with some of these recommended changes.
Great. And I know there was a lot of discussion about the study that was mentioned by Kaiser Marsden. And I think that, I'm not sure if it's a recent study or if it's a study that maybe was done last year that was maybe modified and updated for some for today's discussion or for the discussion on the proposed amendments. But do we have the staff person, Kathy Head, on the line in the event that anybody on the council has a question?
We do. Kathy is on the line.
Great. So with that, I'll bring it back to the council if there's any sort of concluding comments or any additional questions. I certainly appreciate everybody who came to the council meeting in person and those who waited online to go ahead and give us their comments and share that. And I want to thank Councilmember Fan for making this additional opportunity available, because we were going to go without these comments that I think were valuable and important for all of us to hear. So thank you, council member, and let me go ahead and bring it back and see if there's any questions or comments from the city council.
I have some questions.
Councilmember Fan.
Thanks. This is for Kathy, our consultant. Just some questions to follow up, as it was brought up multiple times by the speakers, our commentators. And so I guess I just wanted some clarification. So the first issue, I think it was mentioned in the BIA letter on page 6, that, condo construction is cheaper than rental construction. Can you explain that, or why that is the case? Because they seem to, view that as kind of the opposite of what it would typically be.
Kathy, can you raise your hand, please?
Kathy is able to unmute herself. She's on the panelist side. Kathy Head, if you can please unmute your... There you go.
I am unmuted.
Yes.
I was waving my hands, but that didn't really work. Yeah, there were not, if I could just answer more generally than specifically, there were a number of points made about the costs and the analysis, and I'm sure many of them are valid. And I think that anytime you do a prototype analysis, there are going to be other prototypes that are more expensive or different product types. What I wanted to really focus on, though, given the opportunity to talk, is if you look through the whole analysis, the real focus, the only reason I did cost at all, honestly, was because I had wanted to figure out what was really a supportable production requirement before I figured out what the in lieu fee was. Because what gets really lost in these these studies everywhere, not just here, is what you're really trying to look for is the affordability gap. What's the difference between the market rent and the affordable rent? What's the difference between the market sales price and the affordable sales price? But what happens commonly or always is that those gaps can be very large and not feasible to place all of that burden on the development community. And so the only reason, honestly, the only reason that I did any cost analysis at all was so that I could then mitigate the difference in the affordability gap. If we did this just straight on a 15% requirement with the standards being discussed, the fee would be twice as much as my analysis. But what I did was I said, oh, well, let me go through, and because I think that's a problem. And I mean, clearly you don't want a program that's not feasible that stops development. I don't think that's anyone's objective. It's certainly not mine. And so I'm most willing to talk to the development community at large about that component of the study, the cost component of the study. But I don't want to lose track of the fact that the in lieu fee is a surrogate for production. And a $5 fee, as I believe any number of people mentioned, is only going to give you a fraction of that cost to produce that 15%. And the $15 only gives you a bigger fraction of the cost to produce it. But it doesn't actually fill the whole affordability gap with a 15% requirement. So yes, I mean, I really prefer not to go line by line on development costs really ever, but certainly not in this kind of a setting. But I'm happy to sit down with anybody and talk about it, and clearly I'm open to discussion on it.
Great, thanks. And so, I'm asking these questions because we did get a letter that was very detailed, and I do appreciate that. That's why I think many of us up here wanted to have this public discussion on this issue. And so the other question is just really regarding, a comparison of your prototype with, I guess, current scenarios of the cost of building affordable rental projects by BIA members. I understand that you're using a prototype, so it's a little bit of an amalgamation of a number of projects, but maybe you can kind of help us understand why it seems the price differential or the cost per unit is it seems quite large, or maybe you don't have an answer for that, but I figured I'd ask.
No, it's a fair question. It's absolutely a fair question. I think another thing to think about, and again, just talking about big concepts and sort of logic, is all of the focus on the folks who were opposed to raising the fee was discussing how my costs were too low. The flip side was never discussed about how perhaps my rents and my sales prices were also too low. And if they're not, so if my costs are too low, but my rents or my sales prices are correct, then market rate development's not feasible at all. I mean, if you do the math with you just raise all the costs but leaves the rents and the sales prices, forget affordability. It's just not feasible. Now, if that can be true, by the way, that can be true that development is not feasible. But ultimately, what would happen when it's not feasible is then, and somebody mentioned this, was then land prices adjust. They adjust either up or down based on changes in the marketplace. And so, again, happy to discuss it with anyone, but I always do have I almost laugh to some extent where I always hear my costs are too low, but I never ever hear that my rents are too low. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at all the comments. And I think if you look at the comments, and I think if we had I've done this in other cities. I did this in Pasadena where I sat down with the development community and we went over all the assumptions. And, the first few times through, it was like the costs were very high and the revenues were low, and projects just didn't look like they worked at all, even though people were building all over Pasadena. So there are limitations to performance from both sides. There are limitations from my side, certainly, and limitations from the development community side. Performers are only as good as the numbers you put into them. And I did the best I can. I'm sure they're doing the best they can. But I think that's important to recognize, just to stay within the concepts. I did want to make one more comment while I'm talking. One gentleman mentioned that I measured profit as a share of development costs rather than value. The reason I do that, I do it for a very specific reason, is because I'm doing both market rate scenarios and then comparing them to affordable scenarios. And in fact, when you have an affordable scenario in there, then your revenues are lower Well, there's no rational reason that a developer would want to take a lower percentage return because they had a requirement, so a lower percentage return on those units because they rent for less or they have a lower sales price. So what I use specifically for inclusionary, I use development costs as a measure because development costs stay static. And so when you're imposing those lower prices, they don't automatically get this lower profit percentage. So that's the reason I do it.
Okay, and apologies if I'm not understanding, but can you, I guess, better clarify for me, when you're saying no one's complaining about your rent estimates being too low, what exactly do you mean? Are you saying that, the estimates that you put into your report is not something that they think is improbable or implausible?
I think it means that it doesn't advance their argument. No, I do. And I don't blame them. I think if you say costs are too low, then it shows that they should be higher. And if they're higher, then the project's not feasible. But if you don't then look at on the other side on the next page and evaluate the rents or the sales prices in that same light and say, oh, well, maybe those seem too low too. Or maybe they don't. But that's my whole point is nobody gets up ever and tells me my rents or my sales prices are too low. Ever. But they often tell me my costs are.
Got it. The other one I wanted to mention was regarding the reasonable rates of return. The letter mentions that you had 4.6%. The developer said it should have been 5.25%. What is something you typically see in your experience?
No, that's a really good question. And the point is, again, that's not saying that that's a reasonable return. That's saying it's the return that falls out of my market rate analysis. And so, again, I'm only doing a comparison of what does a market rate project return versus what a project with affordable units returns. So again, if you start and you say, oh, well, there's now a threshold return, which is true. Every developer will do that for a project. They'll say, what's my threshold return, that I'll go forward with. My concern with doing that methodology for an inclusionary policy or an affordable policy is then again, you're starting off by saying the project isn't feasible as a market rate project. And again, this is again because pro formas are only, they're just a tool. We know they're feasible because they're being developed. And so it's a relative number. It's how much does imposing that affordability requirement change the return? Not was the first return reasonable. If the return was too high, I don't adjust for that either. It's a marginal or an incremental analysis to say, what is the impact of this one change? And this one change is imposing affordable housing restrictions on the project.
Okay, so for further clarification, if, say, the project that you have here at 4.6% is saying, okay, we're requiring X number of affordable units, if the developer pays the fee and builds no affordable units, you're saying that 4.6% could be higher?
Yes.
Got it.
Oh, look, now I'm on the screen. Oh. Hello.
So because the vast majority of developments in the city that, fall under WHO requirements do not build affordable units, right? They pay the fee and then they build market rate and charge whatever the market will bear. So that also helps me better understand that. The other thing was just a parking question, the cost of parking. Maybe I'm a little naive or I haven't been to enough developments in the city, but I personally haven't experienced any underground parking here in Santa Ana. When I was living in LA, there were many of those, and I know those are quite expensive. So yeah, the other thing was, your parking estimates were too low. Did you take into account what type of parking? Did it not matter?
Yes, no, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it does. So it absolutely does. And land cost plays into what type of parking you do. I think I keep vanishing too here, sorry. Land costs play into that. So if you can buy land inexpensively, then you won't build intense parking like underground. As land prices get higher, it's cheaper to start building underground than to buy more land. So that's why.
Great. That actually makes a lot of sense. And
I don't know what's happening.
so the other question I had is, one of the developers spoke to the estimate of land costs being too low, at $2 million, whereas in his experience, it's $5 or $6 million. I guess, how old is that land cost estimate that you have there, and what is your experience today?
Yeah, so right now, at the moment, I'm not working on any projects in Santa Ana. And land prices change radically and have changed radically over time. Again, it's conceivable. It's absolutely, I'm not denying many of the contentions, as being plausible. I'm just once again saying then the argument would then be it's not feasible to build market rate even if there's no inclusionary. And that's just not being borne out in fact.
Okay, thank you. And the other...
can I just answer a question you didn't ask just a minute ago, but
sure,
you sort of
course.
almost did? The reason people pay the fee instead of producing is twofold. One, it's significantly less than the affordability gap, and this was mentioned numerous times in the public comment. It's dramatically less than the gap between the market rate price and the affordable price, and so it just makes good economic sense to pay the fee. And the other reason is developers love certainty. And so they know what the fee amount is, and then they get full upside potential on all their units. But the key, and this always gets lost in inclusionary, is you're really measuring against a production requirement. And so if that part gets lost in this analysis, then it loses. It's sort of at that point you say, well, why do the analysis at all? Just pick a fee and use it.
Thank you. And the last kind of topic I wanted to ask about is, and this wasn't in the analysis, I don't think it was in the original just request for the project either, or excuse me, the report either, but a number of speakers had mentioned the use of skilled and trained workforce, as well as a local hire requirement. I think one gentleman had mentioned potentially doing a tiering system in which a fee would, I guess, step down based on the number of skilled and trained workers that they use. I guess, what is your experience with that? Do other cities use this? And do you have any thoughts on that further?
There are definitely cities that have imposed skilled labor requirements in their programs, and there are cities, the majority of cities that I work in have not. It is another impact on cost. It does have that impact. It needs to be factored in because the use of skilled labor, while great from policy perspectives and a number of very good reasons, it doesn't add value to the project. And so it's another cost that's then not recouped with additional sales prices or additional rent. And so much like the in lieu fee, it's just another thing that reduces profit. And while I think it's important not to establish guidelines, be it inclusionary, be it skilled labor, that deprive a developer of a reasonable return, because if they're not making a reasonable return, and this point was made a number of times, they just won't develop. I mean, that's true. If they're going to not make as much money as they could make in another community, or they could make on another type of project, they'll choose the other community or the other type of project.
Great, thank you for that. That's done with my first round of questions. Thanks, Mayor.
Great, thank you, Council Member. Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilman Becerra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to I'm not going to continue to repeat myself, but I will just in this one instance. 15 times 0 over 5 years is 0. We had $0 coming in. Now, my colleagues, with only 5 months under its belt, the revisions, $5 a foot times 5 months, equated to $3.7 million in lieu funds that went to helping sustain our community, that help with down payment assistance, which, by the way, is something I don't see in this draft, which is kind of concerning to me. It goes towards rehabbing units that the covenant is about to expire, which is important because, if you have an affordable unit that became affordable back in 1969, it probably needs a little work by now, just saying. The other thing, and I've said this last time, is that with the WHO altogether, if we didn't have a WHO, we would still be generating affordable housing. In fact, out of the 844 units that we produced that were low and very low, only 107 received any sort of financing related to in lieu funds from the WHO. That's it. So in other words, affordable housing will be constructed in Santa Ana, as the track record has shown. One of the comments I wanted to address that I heard from the community that talked about, it would take years to build the WHO funds so that they can leverage them for other affordable units. As we just saw over the last 5 months, it won't take years if you have the right policy. It'll take months. 3.7 million in 5 months, in case you didn't catch that the first time. Okay? And then as far as this study goes, we could sit here with the scalpel and pick it apart and say, well, they didn't account for this, the cost was too low here, the cost was too high there. But here's a very telling thing. The study talks about scenarios. It talks about prototypes. We've had 5 years of $15 a foot, and it equated to, wait for it, zero. Whereas $5 a foot equated to 3.7 million in 5 months. So we don't need scenarios. We actually have a track record that shows, we have history that shows it. It's not hypothetical. It's right there in black and white. It's scientific. It is shown that when we reduced that fee, we were starting to attract, not only did we get sticks in the ground, we got construction going. In fact, there are folks here from the carpenters and the laborers that actually were building, or are building projects here in this city because of that. And so I would actually say to my colleagues, if there's anything I would like to see us further study, and preferably with somebody that could actually have experience in this particular arena, and that would be, I would like to see us analyze a sliding scale when it comes to utilizing a local skilled trained workforce, and to see how we can do that where taking the existing WHO fee and looking at how we can incentivize developers through a reduction in that fee to make sure that we're bringing in that local skilled trained workforce. Because, I think as one of my colleagues had said during the last time we talked about this, if we can improve, it's not just about trying to artificially suppress the cost of housing, but to actually put money in the pockets of our workers. That's what's going to allow for housing affordability. It feels so much better to see somebody be able to afford it because they've got a good paying job. They've got the dignity, the pride that that's what's happening. But no, we're not talking about that. We're taking Econ 101, ripping up the book and saying supply and demand, that's crazy. No, but let's look at it from how we can actually make housing affordability work by actually employing that local skilled and trained workforce. Let's incentivize developers to utilize our local workers. I mean, one gentleman came up here and said, I don't want to build in LA. I don't want you to either. I want you to put some sticks in the ground right here in Santa Ana and help us address the housing crisis here when it comes to supply. We need supply. So those are my comments at this moment, Mr. Mayor. So I hope that we will, if there's any sort of homework that we do after this, I'd like to see us analyze that particular aspect. Thank you.
Great, thank you for those comments. Let me bring it back to anybody else. Councilmember Lopez.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions for staff. What we learned in the previous session that we had was that there were 2 ad hoc committees last year that were put together to study this topic that we're talking about now. How many reports did those ad hocs put together?
In terms of the study that were...
Yeah, like the Kaiser Martin study that we have.
The Kaiser Martin report was originally requested as part of the initial process by the first committee.
Okay. So they did the same, essentially, the same study that we have now in front of us.
The study in front of you is an updated study based on that 2020 study.
Okay, thank you. And then one of the things that as an ad hoc we discussed that people, the public has questions about is why isn't one of the recommendations that we don't implement this to all new development? Can you walk us through that, Director?
I'm sorry, I was trying to listen to the question. Can you repeat that?
So why isn't one of the recommendations, or not necessarily why it is and not, but what was the conversation about why, our recommendation doesn't necessarily cover all development being built in the city?
The reason is that the necessity for covering all development would have to be evaluated based on the totality of the development in the city and be completed through financial analysis. The goal of the committee was to evaluate development based and requirement based on actions that were taken by the city and not necessarily having to apply to all project. It was seen as somewhat of a burden to apply to all project, but rather just to look at project that benefits from city action that increases residential or allow for residential density to occur.
Okay. And another question I had is if, down the line within the 45, 60 days, direction comes back and the council approves this, would that cover the new entitled projects?
That is going to be a policy question for the council, is to at what point and how to apply the ordinance. There are projects that have been entitled under the current ordinance, but have not pulled building permit, and it would be a policy direction if this council decided to move forward with the recommended changes, is to at what point in time do you apply the fee to those projects that has already been entitled. Past ordinances have allowed for and recognized the entitlement of a project, and it was conceived at a different financial times, and those projects would be considered grandfathered into a fee structure, and the proposal could then apply to project moving day forward, meaning that when the ordinance is effective, and that's when it would apply to projects.
Okay, thank you. And another question that I have is, I think, what was it, 3.7 million that we got from the HOO fees last year? Did I hear that correctly?
About $3.7 million.
3.7, okay. And if the HOO would not have been amended, what would have been that dollar amount?
10.1, but three times.
About 3 times?
Yes.
So how much would you say that we left out on the table?
7.4.
Wow, okay, thank you. Another question that I have, actually I don't have any more, thank you.
Thank you, council member. Any other question? I know we have council member Mendoza who has some questions and comments. Council member? Councilmember Mendoza, can you hear us? She might be dialing in.
It looks like where she's located, maybe her audio device isn't picking up very well. The only thing I can do is mute her. Councilmember Mendoza?
Can she call back on another line or something, or?
Yes, I will send her that information.
All right, well, let's keep trying. Let's see if we can give her another number for her to call in on. Any other questions? Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes. Director Tai, I'm sorry, if you can just confirm that that last amount that you shared with Councilwoman Lopez, had we not decreased the in lieu fee, how much money could we have potentially generated?
So what I can say is that the fee that were paid were at $5 and it amounts to 3.7. Under the old process, that would have been $15. So you collected 1/3, an additional 2/3, I evaluated about 11.2, just shy of $12 million.
Shy of $12
in
million.
total, but the collection was 3.7.
Thank you, thank you. My apologies, I wasn't sure the number, what it was referring to, so I just wanted some clarification. Thank you, Director Tai. I just wanted to echo the ad hoc committee recommendations on the key WHO provisions. I want to thank my colleagues that sit on that ad hoc. I just wanted to offer my support for making the skilled and trained workforce a mandatory commitment. I think that is going to improve not only housing here in the city, but it's going to vastly improve the whole preface behind why the skilled and trained workforce is so important. Because at the end of the day, development is going to happen in our city. We want to make sure that the development that happens is good development and that it's done by people that live and work here locally. When we don't have skilled and trained workforce and local hire at the table, what ends up happening is we have developers come to our city, bring workers from out of town, and maybe they spend $15 to $20 here on a daily basis, and that's lunch and a drink. And then they go home and spend that money in their communities. And Santa Ana doesn't see any of that. So if we want to not only help our residents out by giving them access to affordable housing, but we also want to make sure that we're giving a hand up to the workers that are living in our community, that are spending their dollars down here. So I just wanted to echo that that's something I'm supporting, is considering making this provision a mandatory commitment. Furthermore, I also liked seeing the additional enhancements to the ordinance, which was a priority for the creation of new affordable housing opportunities for large families currently living in the city. We're very limited to the amount of units that we have that are upwards of 3 to 4 bedrooms, but yet we have, and it's pretty normal in the city of Santa Ana for families to live in a 2-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 to 4 families. So to accommodate that, I think that would be a big priority for us. And I just had some additional recommendations that I would like to see added to the ordinance, some additional enhancements, I think, which would strengthen the WHO, would be a local hire component, because that increases the quality of life for our neighbors. And what value are these projects? I mean, if it's built by somebody that you trust and that you know, that grew up in your community, I think that is extremely valuable to me. And in addition to that, one of our residents brought up, maybe we incentivize some of these developers for having a local diversity bonus. And in addition to that, something that is extremely important to me is, like I mentioned, the skilled and trained workforce, renter protections, right to remain, right to return. I know that there's developments that happen, and eventually, you know, from time to time there's expansion. I would hate to see something like that happen and residents not have the ability to return to their homes. So that's extremely important to me. And lastly, Councilmember Becerra brought it up, down payment assistance. I think that that's a great idea. So I would be interested in looking into that as well. And that concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hernandez. I think we may be successful with Councilmember Mendoza. I know she's trying to log on another, or call in on another line. Madam Clerk, is there any response?
She hasn't reconnected yet. I'm still waiting for her to reconnect.
Got it. Well, give me a hand signal or something when she's ready to connect to us.
Yes. May I just ask one clarifying question to Director Tai?
Sure, go ahead.
So in response to one of my colleagues' questions, you said that $6 million was left on the table. So are you telling me, before you answer, are you telling me that you had commitments from developers that were ready to pay $15 a foot and that they deliberately held off because they thought $5 a foot was coming?
What I discussed was the difference between the 3.7 and the $11 million that would have been the fee, the difference between $5 and $15. I can't estimate as to who would pay that fee or not. All we do know is that who paid the fee and at what rate, which we do have a...
I mean, and if you do the math, if we had $30 a foot, maybe we left a lot more on the table. And if it was $50 a foot, I mean, that's a lot more we left on the table. But the reality is nobody was paying that, correct?
I can only tell you what has been paid, which is at $5.
So 5 years at $15 a foot, how many folks paid that?
No one paid the $15 fee.
Zero. So to say that anybody left any money on the table, I think is not fair. I think the reality is, if the fee was larger, and, this is the key part, and developers were willing to pay it, then I think it's very fair to say we left money on the table. But the reason why we dropped the fee to $5 a foot was to spur construction, to spur payment of the WHO fee. So I just want to clarify, because it just sounds awful to sound like we just left money on the table. We didn't leave money on the table. The money wasn't coming to the table. That's why we dropped the fee. So that's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember. I know a couple of council members haven't spoken, and I want to make sure that they have a chance to speak, and we may go a second round, hopefully not a third, but I think a second should be plenty. But in case, Mayor Pro Tem, are you good? Good, and we're still waiting for Councilmember Mendoza. I just have a couple of comments, and I know Councilmember Fan has some follow-up as well. So look, I just want to thank everybody who came to speak tonight, and those who offered their comments by phone, and staff who provided presentation, information, background. And yeah, this is, it's funny, we didn't have a housing opportunity ordinance, or for lack of a better term, we didn't have an affordability or an affordable housing ordinance ever in the city. I think the first one was, I think, in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And the idea was, what kind of community do we live in, right? Do we need this? What kind of demographic do we have? What's the average median income for a resident that lives in Santa Ana? And I was struck by somebody's simple math that said, an average person, and this is on a good day, makes minimum wage, about $15 an hour, and they work 40 hours a week, and they earn, if we do some simple math, $2,400 a month, and that's before taxes. So for that person to afford one of the one-bedroom units that is market rate, what's the, I guess, again, I'm a liberal arts major, so Mr. Tai, if you can explain to me what the average monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment, market rate apartment, is going for these days.
Based on the KMA study, let me look for it here. Kathy, do you happen to have that rent number handy?
I'm muted again, just a second. I am pulling it up. It'll take a second. Okay. The rent, the average rent, if you take it all across the average, ended up being about $2.77 a square foot a month. It ranged from $24.20 for studio units up to $37.50 for 3-bedroom units.
Got it. So just, I guess, roughly speaking, if we had somebody who was earning minimum wage here, single parent, and was earning $2,400 a month full-time.
Right.
We do. Is there anything market rate that would be available to them if they wanted to have any money left over to eat, to clothe their kids, clothe themselves, feed themselves, provide medicine for themselves? Probably tough, right? So in any event, let me just go back to that, come back to that in a little bit. But look, I want to thank everybody who's been asking really intelligent, critical questions of this, because it's important. But I know there's been a lot of discussion on the summary and the study that was prepared by Kaiser Marsden last year for the 2 ad hoc committees that were convened. And just as a question, Kathy or Min, can you tell me how long Kaiser Marsden has been providing studies and consulting information for the city of Santa Ana?
I can tell you. We've been doing it since the late 1970s.
So for the past 50 years, or close to 50 years?
Close to it. Well, I've been at Kaiser Marsden for 38 of them.
And I'm not going to say you were doing it, right?
I started providing services to you in 1983.
You started when you were 10 years old, so
Yes, I was in junior high.
So look, I want to thank you for your firm's support of what we've done with respect to policy here in the city. And I think, people in the industry can disagree, just like, any professionals, whether it's lawyers, whether it's, planners or anything else, can disagree. But I think that your findings and your assumptions could certainly be questioned. But I think in the end, I think the city has trusted the reputation of your firm, which is why we have continued to retain you. So I just want to thank you. And I certainly thought that your findings last year to a study that I didn't see showed that we were somewhere in between 14 and 15 at that point. And so now we're at between 17 and 18, and these are just thresholds that would be able to withstand challenge and not be considered takings. So to the extent we were to go, like somebody said, let's do 30%, an in lieu fee, that probably wouldn't withstand a legal challenge and probably would be considered a taking under the Fifth Amendment. So I certainly think that your approach has been reasonable. I think it's been legally sustainable. So all those things are important to me. But, I do kind of want to, just come back to what some others were saying. And I think that, for me, I was looking at these other cities. So if somebody can explain to me, and Kathy, you might be the right person to explain, is there development happening in the city of Pasadena?
Yes.
Okay. Is there city happening is there development happening in the city of Irvine?
Yes.
Okay. So the city of Pasadena has a set aside of 20% affordability, and the city of Irvine has their in lieu fee at 15%. So to say that you're going to have zero development when you have fees that are at 15 or 20% doesn't really make sense to me. I know that I'm the only one on the council, I think that was here in 2015. Look, I don't know what happened and why there wasn't development, but sort of what I had heard was a chilling amongst the industry saying that, look, just wait and don't develop, don't pull permit fees, go ahead and get entitled, but don't pay any fees because we may go ahead and reduce these fees to zero. And that's what some of the development community had told me. And so I don't know if that's true. That's anecdotal as what a person pays for an affordable unit, which is about $500 or $600, and what the market rate units go for, which is close to $2,500. So to the extent that there was an artificial chilling of that of the use of the housing opportunity ordinance, I don't know. That's an open question. But there certainly is, I think, there certainly are other communities that have been able to have development within their communities at 15 to 20. So I don't think we're off base here. And Irvine and Pasadena have a much higher AMI for their demographic. Santa Ana is one of the lowest income communities, definitely in the county, but in the state. So to the extent that we build, and we have to ask ourselves this baseline question that I try to ask myself, who are we building for? If we're going to do market rate, we know it's not for the majority of Santa Ana residents. There may be some that will afford it, but not many. So if that's our goal, to build for others outside our community, then I think we go to zero. Or I think we stay at 5. Let's go ahead and build for others that don't reside in our community and that don't have the need. So if that's the goal, then yeah, I think we're right. We're right where we need to be. But I think what I've heard from the ad hoc committee, what I heard from many residents is, let's have balance. I think that what does RENA stand for? I always forget.
Regional Housing Needs Assessment.
So the RENA requirements for market rate housing and moderate housing, we've exceeded by leaps and bounds. We've exceeded the affordability as well, but we've definitely exceeded the market rate requirement that was asked of us on that. So we've certainly done our share in that area, but I guess to me, we just haven't been building enough for the residents that have the highest need. We certainly have been building for those that have the highest income. And that's the question. Who are we building for? Those with the highest income or those with the highest need? So that's sort of guiding, that's the principle guiding my decision-making here, is trying to build for the residents that have asked us. We need help. We all have been talking about a housing crisis, and those folks are not asking us to go to 50%, 60%. They're just saying set some aside for us so we can leverage those monies, because there are monies at the state that are available. And to the extent we have some money to be able to use to bundle them with other state and federal funds to develop more affordable housing for our community, make it a safer community, have families that'll live in a dignified way, one family household to a unit as opposed to having 3 and 4 to a unit because they can't make the rent, then that's sort of the principled question that I'm trying to grapple with. And I think that the balance here is not to dissuade or to discourage development. It's to encourage development while at the same time being respectful of the community that you're building in. It is a privilege to do business in Santa Ana, and I will say that. It is a community that welcomes you. It's a community that will do anything else to go ahead and continue to offset any issues or obstacles you may have. Whether it's, and I've said this to the ad hoc, let's delay or defer some of those, the fees till the certificate of occupancy is issued. Other ways we can do to go ahead and provide relief. But we ask the development community, why don't you join us in wanting to build more for our community that needs it? That's what I'm asking of you. And I think it's a fair ask because this is a partnership. And it shouldn't be the city just simply giving things away and saying 0 fees and don't help our struggling families, our working families, families that are going to have to leave Santa Ana because they can't afford to live here anymore. That's the ask I guess I'm making of you. So with that, let me go ahead and go to a second round. Councilmember Mendoza, I believe, is ready. Councilmember?
Good afternoon. Good evening, Mayor and fellow council members. Am I on? You can hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Okay, very good. Well, I appreciate all the hard work that the staff has done, and I want to thank all the stakeholders who have appeared in person and over the phone. And I'm sure you will agree that this is a very difficult decision. It's a very controversial issue, and we do want to, as the mayor mentioned, and I agree totally, that we need to have a total balance. And one way to do that is to continue to encourage the developers to build affordable housing. And these would be the developers who are not going to be using the trained and skilled workforce. I think that would be reasonable in increasing the fee. However, I see an alternative plan is not just giving away services and housing. I see maybe we need to have some kind of plan in action to encourage our citizens to make a way, a path, a journey to better living conditions through education or some kind of training. And so what I see, if our residents are able to get this training, that they will be able to afford living in their own apartment as opposed to 3 or 4 families in the same apartment. And I realize that many of our citizens are low income and they are working 3 and 4 jobs. But what if we could help them to get the training and then just get that one job that will help them rent something that decent and dignified living. So because if we continue to give them the fish, they're not going to learn to fish and be self-supportive. So we need to find some way to have them be able to afford their own housing You know, I was one of those low-income residents at one time as an immigrant, but I followed the educational path and the hands-on training in other ways, and my salary and earnings increased steadily over the years. And today I have a very nice home here in a beautiful part of a city in Ward, and I'm able to reach that American dream through the education. I did not rely on the city of Santa Ana to give me low-income housing, and the same goes for my brothers and sisters. We did it that way, and I know that many of our residents are a little older and probably do not have the ways, the means.
Councilmember, can you hear me? I think we may have. Councilmember Mendoza? Look, I think the signal may have gotten frozen. The good thing is that you froze and you had a really nice looking freeze. Sometimes when we freeze, we get this awkward look. You froze at the perfect moment. You look great. So let me bring it back. I know Councilmember Fan. So Madam Clerk, if we're able to get the council member back, Councilmember Mendoza, just go ahead and call on me so we can interrupt. Go right after Councilmember Fan.
We lost her. She looks like she's going to have to reconnect. Oh, there she is.
Oh, there you are.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
I apologize. I would have been
Oh, no.
have some issues going, and I couldn't be there.
Councilmember Mendoza, can you just turn off your video to see if maybe you can have a better response?
Hello, everyone. Good
Try
evening.
now.
How are you doing?
Yes.
Better?
Better.
All right. Thank you. I apologize for that. Normally, my internet works just fine here from home. So I was, as I was mentioning that myself and my family, we were able to buy our homes. We all own a home. And we were, at that time when we were going through our early years, there was no such programs as housing assistance and I don't think we ever had any WHO ordinance that helped us to purchase a home. And so I want to encourage our residents to continue to work hard for their family as they have been, but also to find a way to get better jobs through better training and education. And we have those resources, especially now with the CARES money. We could provide some kind of training so that in the future, instead of $10 an hour, you're making $20, $30 an hour. And with that, I think our residents would be able to afford a place where they can live in a dignified manner with their families, and not living on 3 or 4 families in a single family home. So my recommendation would be to maybe continue this and have a further analysis, kind of like a second opinion. If you have a condition that you're not quite sure of the diagnosis, that we have a second analysis from a different source, and let's see how we can, if there's a way where we can keep it at a rate that is reasonable for the developers and to encourage them to build. But at the same time, what would it look like if we were to increase the fee for those developers who choose not to use the trained and skilled workforce? But I want to point out and emphasize that the lowering of the fee to $5 actually brought in more building, new construction, so that the residents can have this more housing. If we had not done that, that supposedly 7.4 million that we missed out on, that the city would have obtained, actually that that was not going to happen because developers would not have built. So we are very fortunate that the developers came in and started building when that fee was reduced to $5. So I would like to entertain that we continue this and have a better detailed and analysis on this, because it seems like there's some areas where it's a little gray, and so I'd like to see a black and white, and so I recommend a continuation.
Thank you, Councilmember. And we're just, since this is a study session, we're just giving direction and guidance and comments to staff, but your points are well received. Let me go to Mayor Pro Tem Peñalosa and then to Councilmember Fan.
Thank you, Mayor Sarmiento. I just wanted to repeat what I said at the last two meetings, that I didn't want to repeat what I had said, just under a year ago. I'm not supportive of any of the ad hoc recommendations. I think they're definitely unnecessary at this time. The only one that I am looking to consider is looking at ways where we could consider making the skilled and trained workforce segment at some kind of, or a level of mandatory commitment when it's moving down this path. But any of the others, I mean, just looking at the different provisions, in my opinion, not necessary. There's, we definitely believe, at least me personally, that there should be a diverse housing stock in this city. That's always been my commitment from day one, is that we must have a diverse housing stock in this city, which was why, we have a $5, housing opportunity ordinance, $5 fee. That ensures that we not only spur development like we did last year over 5 years without seeing any building permits pulled, reducing it to 5. Voila, we had a bunch of building permits pulled, and now we have money and funds that we could use to provide rental assistance and affordable or money into affordable housing projects. That was a whole goal. My position still stays the same, and that is all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Fan, and then Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted some clarification, Director Tai. So when we did some red lines to the WHO, if I'm not mistaken, the last edits included provisions to allow WHO dollars to go to the purchase and rehabilitation of housing units, correct?
That still is a policy.
That's what I thought. I think the way that Section 41-1909A1 was reorganized, maybe changed a little bit, but the provisions for, down payment assistance and whatnot is still there. The provision to protect against eviction and provide legal housing assistance is still there. The provisions for code enforcement are still there. So I'm glad that stayed. The other, thing a few things I wanted to touch on is, I think several of us up here have mentioned that we are interested in looking at, and I would like to see the team look at a kind of a step system when we decide to add on a skilled and trained workforce. We, as Kathy mentioned, it is a cost, right? Just like the WHO fees. However, a lot of these also include fewer accidents on time, making things stay on schedule, which is what you hope for, but there's always contingencies. And, we have evidence to show that these types of skilled and trained workforce ensures that projects save money in the long run. So I would like to see that, what that would look like at the $15, or even going down to my next comment, is that while we do say, okay, $15 an hour, $15 a square foot, no one was paying it. But you know what people were paying? Developers were paying $9.35 an hour for Skyline Towers, $9.35 an hour for the Market South Coast Metro, $9.35 per square feet at City Place, $9.35 per square feet Harbor Ventures, $10.80 at the 301 Prisma Apartments, and I can go on. So while the $15 an hour, as some say, may be too high, well, we have evidence that at least at $9 or $10 per square foot is feasible. And I do want to ask, those in our development community, to help me understand, and please, apologies for my ignorance, which is how do you go forward with obtaining financing, knowing that the WHO fees are at $15 an hour, go through the entire application process, and then say, well, it's too much, we can't build. So I'm just really curious how that works, because typically, again, please apologies for my ignorance, if you decide to go and build something, you say, I have a certain budget, and this is the expectation, and you go and build it. Maybe they intended to sell the land, maybe they intended to sell the entitlements, I don't know. But I would love to get an answer to that, because at least 2 developments who waited to pull building permits after the 2020 WHO amendments got their applications in and completed them prior to the 2020 amendments. The other question, or I guess maybe not a question, is, when we're looking at the rental prices, and it's incredibly upsetting in the report because they're so high. Being a renter in our city is less affordable than being a homeowner. Many homeowners in our city bought homes many years ago. I'm going to use my house as an example. I bought a townhouse in 2019. In July, we closed May 2019. We paid $467,000 for a little bit under 1,200 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse. In 2008, that home sold for $205,000. So in about 12 years, the value of that home doubled. And I pay $2,400 a month for our mortgage, $2,440. And when you look at the numbers for the average monthly rent for a studio unit, market rate in Orange County, or the pro forma analysis, is $2,400 for a studio. It's incredibly expensive to be a renter in our city. So I can't imagine having a family not being able to afford a down payment and having to pay for the 2-bedroom units or the 3-bedroom units here. So I think it's really important that we keep that in mind as we are looking to use these WHO funds and why we're looking to adjust it, because the rental market is there. They are being built, they are being rented out, and folks are still making a profit. There's nothing wrong with that. I want to encourage that, but I also want to make sure that as we pursue development in our city, we also make sure that we address the need. A $2,400 studio unit in our city is not affordable for the vast majority of our residents, and definitely not affordable for people like my mom. So I definitely want to see us address that, and that is why we looked at addressing the WHO numbers. The other thing I want to address, and Director Tai, maybe you can help clarify for me, is that the 2015 WHO had a trigger, right? Was it, so it's the same trigger that we have, or we're looking to amend back to today?
Correct. You're looking at instituting and reverting back to similar triggers as the former WHO, prior to 2020.
Okay. And so, I guess I look at that and say, well, it's applying to everybody. You're on the same playing field if you're in this city. And if you want to go with ballot box, zoning, or ballot box planning and building, feel free. Costa Mesa is doing that right now. And, us up here, we're trying to find a way to not only encourage building, but also encourage a variety of buildings. And so, looking at the WHO, looking at the lockstep, or the various steps for skilled and trained, many of whom live locally, to be able to afford the units that they are building is crucial. Those dollars are going back into the community, they're not going anywhere else. And I think that as we look at housing development in the city, we have to really look at who are we serving, because I look at these numbers and I can barely fathom myself paying for them. And I know I've been very fortunate during this pandemic and in my career. And so with that, I hope staff will go look at some of those issues, and I look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Fan. Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Tai, if you can kindly just tell me what the median rent price is here in the city of Santa Ana.
So based on the rent survey, the average price for a one-bedroom is about $2,700. For a two-bedroom is about $3,300, and for a three-bedroom, it's about $3,700.
And that's in Santa Ana?
That's based on the surveys for Santa Ana.
Okay. Per the United States Census Bureau, resident, and this is 2019's information, the average income of residents in the city of Santa Ana is $20,867. That's $1,738 a month. How do we expect residents to live in this community when I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. And the reason why I brought this forth for the public and for my colleagues is to shine a light that we are very fortunate as policymakers to be in a position where we can either help community or harm them. And I'm going to share my story because it's part of why I'm up here at the dais now as a council member. But I became a parent in 2010, and I had just graduated high school. Not the most ideal situation to be in as an 18-year-old young man, but it was my reality, and I own it. But I rented my first apartment, 333 South Flower Street, apartment 18, right in front of Santa Ana High School. And I was paying $975 at that point. By 2012, I moved to 326 South Garnsey Street, apartment 207, and was paying $1,150 for a two-bedroom. And no, I'm a single father. And fast forward to 2016, the cost of living at that point had then increased to $1,850 for me. And that is all within having a daughter from birth to being 7 years of age. I'm fortunate that throughout that time I was a union member and had union wages and was able to move up and make a much better living, and I'm now a homeowner. But that's not the reality for everybody. And as an elected official, I also have to shine a light that part of why development did happen is it's because of the political power that came with that. The ability to change the in lieu fee from 15 to 5 is what obviously was the catalyst for the development to happen. But if we have policymakers here that are willing to stand and put people over profit and meet the residents where they're at, these developers will build. And any developer that doesn't want to build to meet the needs of our residents, well, thank you, you did us the favor, we don't want you in our city anyway. Because in this city, housing is not accessible to everybody. And it's the reason why from today to Saturday morning, there was 8 violent crimes or robberies or assaults that occurred that we receive as electeds in our emails. If we want to get in front of public safety, if we want to get in front of the housing crisis, if we want to be proactive when it comes to being responsive to the houseless issue, housing is fundamentally a key factor in people's mental health. This is an intersectional policy discussion. It's not just solely about us not being friendly to developers, but as a city, we have to meet the needs of our residents. And people with housing problems are at a greater risk of mental health problems than people that are not. And I can assure you that the people that went out and made those mistakes over this weekend probably came from households that weren't very sustainable or weren't very solid. So good quality, affordable, and safe housing is a vital component in good mental health, and as well as supporting those with existing mental health conditions. So if we care about public safety, if we care about having clean parks, if we care about having nice community centers, and if we care about having healthy neighbors, this is a step in the right direction. Because it is when you are intersectional and understand all of the benefits that come with having a sustainable, thriving community and a strong workforce with protections for the workers and residents, only then can we be proactive in making sure that this city is a safe and vibrant city. That concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. I believe Councilmember Lopez?
Yeah, I do. Councilmember Fan just brought up a point and it made me think about a question. So although people were not paying $15, they were paying a fee, correct?
paid over the last year was at $5 a fee.
Okay, and how many developers contributed to the 3.7 million?
That was 2 projects.
2 projects?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. So there was a community member that came and said in Spanish, in Santana, se puede vivir mejor. And for me, that is the goal, always and in all ways. And housing is one of those ways. My job as a council member is not to make people's lives harder, especially Ward 3 families' lives harder. And so, part of being on the housing ad hoc and looking at the HOO, that's really where I was coming from. And so, I care about the fight for stable housing here. And we've heard enough to know that people are rent burdened, to know that people, when they look at their own budgets, more than 30% they're spending on their rent. And so they're not able to invest back in our local economy. And they're not able to save. And so when we talk about people, pulling themselves up by the bootstrap, it's not like houses cost $100,000 or $200,000 like they used to. The sky of housing it's gone so high that people in my ward, when they talk to me, they say, I want to help my kids buy a home, but I can't afford to because the housing is not the same, the cost. And so for me, when I look at this big picture, we have a housing crisis, and that's my job, to help find a solution to the problem that we face today. And so, we have the ability to tailor the HOO and help us meet the need that currently exists here in the city. And what we are trying to do is add supply at the level that people need it. And that's the bullseye for me in solving this problem. And so I'm very supportive, of course, of the recommendations that the ad hoc made. I'm also supportive of the local hire, making sure that we implement the skilled and trained workforce. Happy that Councilmember Fan, uplifted the language of making sure that we have renter protections in the ordinance. And so those are going to be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think we've heard from everybody twice almost. Or those that wanted to speak twice. So maybe we could start wrapping it up. I think Councilmember Lopez, I think Councilmember Becerra, and Mayor Pro Tem, I think all spoke eloquently about where everybody is. And I just want to say, look, I respect everybody's opinion up here, whether they're consistent with mine or not. I think that the whole idea of a discussion like this is to be able to reflect on different ways to solve a problem, right? We come from different experiences and different paradigms and maybe have different theories on how these problems should be addressed. So I don't denigrate anybody's opinion, no matter how diametrically opposed it could be to mine. If anything, I think we get to a better solution that way. And I want to thank Councilmember Becerra, who I know last year when we were having this conversation made a very, very salient point that rang really profoundly with me was, where are these affordable units going? It was a question that I hadn't asked, right? Are these affordable units that are being built, are they going to Santa Ana residents? And I thought that was a threshold question, because if we were building these affordable units for other people in the community, then again, back to somebody's point, we're not doing our job to be responsive to the residents here in Santa Ana. So I want to thank staff because I know they generated some data points for us, and I know a couple of developments. The Andalusia project, 70-unit affordable project, 63 of 70 units went to Santa Ana residents. That's 90%. The depot at Santiago, 58 of 69 units were leased to Santa Ana residents. That's 84%. The First Street Apartments, a 68-unit affordable housing project went to 100% Santa Ana residents. And La Placita 5, 100% went to Santa Ana residents. But to me, again, if that wasn't the case, then what are we doing, right? Then we're building affordable units for others and not really addressing the questions and the demands that residents made, at least, that I heard, that rang true to me. And so, I want to thank staff. I want to thank the council member because that was a very threshold question. Just like I see that, one of the questions I think that kind of went unanswered here was, how many of the market rate housing units that we built, the hundreds and maybe over 1,000 units went to Santa Ana residents? That would be a very interesting and compelling number to find out, because I would gamble, and I'm not a real gambling person, but I would gamble that probably not 100%, probably not 90 or 80, but probably a very, very low number. So to the extent that, at the very least, these affordable developments and these affordable units that are being created, I think are going to Santa Ana residents. If we can tighten that up, and I've had that conversation with our city attorney, we obviously can't violate federal housing policy and make them exclusive to Santa Ana residents, but we can get very close by building in preferences, by building in criteria. And if you look at the city of Santa Barbara and Santa Monica, they've done an excellent job in making sure that whatever they build, using leveraged monies from the state and federal government, go as close to serving almost all their local community residents. So in any event, I just wanted to say I'm very thankful for the discussion. I'm thankful for the comments, and support the ad hoc's recommendations with a lot of the comments that were made today to augment that and having to do with our friends in labor. So I'm not sure if staff needs any additional direction, but I think hopefully you heard loud and clear.
No, sir, Mayor. I believe we've received enough tonight, and thank you for all of your time, and we will return back with you with incorporating what we heard tonight.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I think our next regularly scheduled meeting is for August 17th, 2021, and so we will adjourn tonight's special meeting to that date. Thank you. Thank you, guys.